Good evening and welcome to the Gin and Tonic show on Friday, the 4th of August. I'm Rob and I co-host with Abu. Abu is my co-host today, and we will be doing part 3 of the mystery. I'm just hearing myself. There we go. The mystery of the Valley, Bakkah, Mecca, and I can't see the rest of it. The Changing Qiblah, part 3. So without further ado, I will hand over to Abu.
Hi everybody. Okay, so this is part 3 of the mystery series. Yes, so last week we where we left off was when we were talking about I was reading from Robert Hoyland's book, and I think the last quote was that some Armenian bishop said that only after the Saracens had conquered Iraq and the Levant, they then penetrated with royal armies into territory of Ishmael. But now we're gonna start with a little bit more Qur'an here to get some more clues. And hopefully today we will finally examine the different candidates for what Mecca could have been. Okay, so here's Surah Al-Rum. He said, Alif Lam Mim. The Byzantines have been defeated, or the Romans have been defeated in the nearest land. But after their defeat, will overcome. But the important part is Fi Adnal Ard, in the nearest land. So if we look at the map, the battle that, or actually, yeah, here we can look at the map. What is the nearest land? If, as Muslims believe now, that Mecca is down here in the deep Hijaz, the deep south of Hijaz, what would be the nearest land? Well, you have Najd, and you have maybe Yemen, but the nearest land, what are they talking about? So then we can switch to Surah. Okay, we read from Surah Al-Rum. Okay, so Surah Al-Rum, the Romance, is the 30th surah of the Qur'an. It consists of 60 ayat. The term, that's not the problem. It consists of the term Rum originated from the word Romance, and in the time of Muhammad referred to the Greek-speaking Romance Byzantine Empire. Hence, the title is sometimes also translated Byzantine. Here's the important part. The surah begins by noting the recent defeat of the Byzantines by the Persians at the Battle of Antioch. The Battle of Antioch took place in 613 outside Antioch, Syria, between Byzantine army led by Hercules and a Persian Sassanid army as part of the Byzantine Sassanid War, 602 to 628. Okay, so this is important. I've looked at like the different parts of this war and seen that could it possibly mean any other battle than the Battle of Antioch? But there's not really any battle that fits except the Battle of Antioch. That was like the major defeat. So if you look at where Antioch is now, it's like in this north part of what you possibly could call Sham or Levant. So here is Antioch. So here the Battle of Antioch took place. So remember when you're saying the Romans are defeated in the nearest land. Remember that this surah was sent down in Mecca, or whatever Mecca was, but it was sent down before the Hijrah. So this is where then you can see on the map what could possibly be the closest land. So it's what it probably mean is that they see the Levant as a whole as one land, which the Arabs they always call Sham. They don't talk much about. That's the word that the Arabs use. So anything that borders on Sham could be said from the nearest land. Okay, now we jump to another clue. This is from Suratun. What's it called in English? This is also a Surah Mekkiyah. It's called Mecca, that was sent down in Surah that was sent down in Mecca, and it talks to the mushrikeen, the pagans in Mecca. Muhammad talks to, or God talks to the mushrikeen through Muhammad. So he says, He causes to grow for you thereby the crops, olives, palm trees, grape wines, and from all the fruits. Indeed, in that is a sign for a people who give thought. And we also have like sort of tin och zaytun och torrsinin, like where he where God swears on the fig tree or the fig and the olive. So when Muhammad is talking to or when God through Muhammad is talking to the mushrikeen in Mecca, he's talking to a people who he causes who have access to crops like palm trees and olives and grape wines. And when you think about where on earth can you grow such crops like grapes and olives? Well, down here in Mecca, you can actually do you can investigate the soil down there and see if it's possible, if ever such crops grew down there. And until this day, there is no evidence that any such crop could be grown there. In fact, there's not any evidence for any, like, this is not has never been a place, or never, but the last like 1,000 years, it hasn't been a place for where you can grow olives and things like that, and grapes, which is a Mediterranean crop. I think the grapes naturally come from this area, Georgia or something like that. What's it called in English? Grape wines. So the original Mecca, the real Mecca, the historical Mecca, should be somewhere in an area where it at least back then was possible to grow such crops. And back then, through it was possible to grow in this area because things have changed since then. Only we don't have to go into that now, but we'll talk about that more later. What should we take next? We take, I think I would like to say something about the Nabateans before I go on. How are they doing back there in the chat? Are they
all good? Yeah, maybe you can tell us who the Nabateans are and what their significance is.
Yeah. I will read from. Okay, because this is important. The Nabateans also, Nabateans, I don't know, Al-Anbat in Arabic, compared to ancient Greeks, blah, blah, blah. This is just so semantic. Who inhabited southern Arabia and southern Levant. Their settlements most prominently the assumed city Raqmu, blah, blah, called, now called Petra. Oh, that's important. City of Raqmu, now called Petra, in CE 37 to C 100, gave the name of Nabatean to the borderland between Arabia and Syria, from the Euphrates to the Red Sea. Their loosely controlled trading network, which centered on strings of oases that they control, where agriculture was intensively practiced in limited areas, and on the routes that linked them had no securely defined boundaries in the surrounding desert. Trajan conquered the Nabatean kingdom, annexing it to the Roman Empire, where their individual culture, easily identified by their characteristic finely potted, painted ceramics, was adopted in the larger Greek-Roman culture. They were later converted to Christianity. Blah, 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 blah. You can read more of this about yourself if you want to know. There's a good... This... that's incorrect. This is not the page I was looking for. Anyway, I show another picture. The point is, the Nabatean kingdom was like, before the Roman took over, that was like the major Arabic kingdom in ancient times. Where's that picture? There. So on this map you can see, this is probably some Christians have done, I think, or I don't know, but it's on. This is the Nabatean kingdom, and as you can see, Petra, as we call it today, Petra is actually, I think, is Greek. It's the same as, or is it Latin? I think it's Greek, but it's the same like Petrus, on this rock, so it means a rock. So here you can see like the boundary of the Nabateans, and they are very important because the Arab cultures of the time of Muhammad was kind of a continuation of this culture. So here you can see Petra, and here is important for us, al-Hijr, meaning the stone, or is that this is where you have al-Ula and Madain Salih, which is one of the candidates that we will talk about. Yeah, so this is you can see how it's stretched. Maybe I will come back to them a little bit more later. But now I will read once again from Tom Holland's In the Shadow of the Sword. From Tom, remember, first I say this. Remember that Ishmael is central to the story of Mecca, and therefore also to the location of Paran, the wilderness that Ishmael and his mother had to flee to. Tom Holland writes, driven not once, but twice into exile by a resentful Sarah, the second occasion had followed the birth of Ishaq, when Ishmael and his hapless mother had been obliged to take up residence in the wilderness of Paran. The location of this particular desert was much debated, which some scholars, including St. Paul himself, identifying it with Sinai. So Sinai. The overwhelming consensus, however, was that it could only have been Negev, Negev is this desert in, I mean, today's Israel is not really a border that existed back then, but it's this desert south of Palestine. No other wilderness stood closer to the sites associated with Abraham, Mamre and the search of Sankt Lot, and Hebron, where the patriarch laid buried, very close to Mamre, in a cave with Ishaq and Yaqub. Certainly, the Arabs of the Negev, when they accepted baptism, appeared to have particular enthusiasm for naming themselves Abraham, as though to remind their fellow Christians that they, unlike other converts, had been blessed by the marks of God's favor, long before the time of Christ. So, why is this important? Because the Qur'an talks a lot about like how Ishmael built the house, and also in the Sunnah they talks about like the whole story about Safa wal Marwa, for example, is about how like baby Ishmael were laying between Safa and Marwa. Safa and Marwa is the two mountains that you go on Hajj. So it was laying there. So the whole story.
On the map, where is that?
Safa al Marwa today is this Safa al Marwa. Is the two mountains that you go between when you make Hajj or Umrah. These two. But I don't think that was the original Safa wal Marwa. I think they are fake. But according to the story, Ishmael was laying there when he was a baby, and you go between them to... anyway, long story, but the point is, the story of Ishmael and where this wilderness supposedly was is important for us when we want to understand what the historical Mecca was. Let's see. Oh, we're going to come to that more about that later. Okay, I continue with reading from Tamala. Now we go into important thing about the Nabateans. So this I have called Dushara. Dushara was a god that you can see here. Dushara Arabic or Dushara Arabic Dushara, Lord of the Mountain, also translated as Dusaris, probably Greekified, a deity in the ancient Middle East worshipped by the Nabateans at Petra and Madain Salih, of which city he was the patron. In Greek times, he was associated with Zeus because he was the chief of the Nabatean pantheon, as well as with Dionysus. Okay, so now I'm going to read, or no, I'm not going to read it, but there's an important thing in Sirat ibn Hisham. Very many windows is open here. In Sirat, no, I think it's the first one there. Okay, so in Sirat ibn Hisham, you can see that in Arabic I haven't translated it. But there's an important story about a temple of the Dushara. Okay, so this is I steal it from this Dan Gibson documentary. What they say, Ibn Hisham from one of those was a man known as Al-Tufayl ibn Amr of Mecca. He accepted Islam on one of his journeys, and once he returned home to Mecca, His wife also decided to accept Islam. At-Tufail then tells his wife to go to the temple of Dushara and cleanse herself there. In the sacred area, there was a trickle of water where she could wash herself. She did this and returned home and learned about Islam. Anyway, so for those who know Arabic, you can read this yourself in Tafsir Sirat ibn Hisham. So, وَكَانَ ذُو الشَّرَى. You can see there. So this is important because in the Mecca there was a temple for Dushara, and we also know that the Quran talks about like أَفْرَأَيْتُمُ اللَّاتَ وَالْعُزَّى. So haven't you seen Al-Lat and Al-Uzza? So Al-Lat is another god, and Al-Uzza. Oh, maybe I have that. I can read about it too if anyone is interested. But there are two other gods. So keep that in mind. Okay, now I'll read again from Tom Holland's In the Shadow of the Sword. Always, however, there was only the one certain measure of holiness. A god could be reckoned no god who did not on occasion keep his sanctuary free of violence. At certain times in certain places, tribes who might otherwise have slaughtered one another with ferocious abandon would assemble upon grounds staked out as hallowed, haram, and there join in festivities quite as joyous and peaceable as those staged every summer at Mamre. Of the Arabs' major shrine, which lay surrounded by palm trees somewhere in the desert south of Palestine, and where the local people were reported to gather twice a year for a whole month or more at a time. It was rumored that even the wild beasts live in peace with men and among themselves. Not necessarily that pacifism were on the agenda whole year around. The gods of the deserts, away from their shrines, rarely objected to bloodshed. On occasion, they might positively demand it. At Hira, okay, you see. I have it on the map. No, it has disappeared. Ah, dude. But if Hira is like here somewhere, south of Kufa, which was an important, or we can read about it. Is that? Ah, dude, I prepared that, then it disappeared. Al-Hira was an ancient city in Mesopotamia located south of what is now Kufa in south-central Iraq. Al-Hira was a significant city in pre-Islamic Arab history. Al-Hira, 4th-7th centuries, was a vassal of the Sassanid Empire, whom it helped in containing the nomadic Arabs to the south. The Lakhmid rules of Hira were recognized by Shapur II. Blah, blah, blah. That's not the important one. You can see where it is at least. It was an important town. So, okay. Where were we? Of the Arabs' major shrine, lay surrounded by palms. At Hira, for instance, there stood two stones sacred to a god named Dushara, no, not Adush, Dushara, which his worshippers would regularly make sticky with gore. A second deity, Al-Uzza, the mighty queen, was graced with an even more spectacular draught of blood when Mundhir sacrificed no fewer than 400 Christian virgins in her honor. And then we jump to later in the book, and Tom Holland says, when Epiphanius, the same energetic cataloger of heresies, who has condemned the Ebionites, Ebionite is like a kind of Jewish version of Christianity, or I should say, has condemned the Ebionites, turned his beady eyes on Dushara. He reported that the gods' worshippers, in a blasphemous parody of Christian beliefs, believed the deity to have been born of a virgin, a Qiblah. The bishop, however, had misheard. Dushara was not a god of a Qiblah, but of a Kaaba, a cube. The allusion was to a stone, black and uncarved, that the Nabateans worshipped as an incarnation of the god Dushara, somewhere in a shrine to the south of the Dead Sea. So this is a very important detail. Very important detail. Their major shrine, where they have this read again. Dushara Kaaba, but a Kaaba, a cube. The illusion was to a stone, black and uncarved, that the Nabateans worshipped as an incarnation of the god, somewhere in a shrine to the south of the Dead Sea. Yeah, so have I missed something here? Okay, so I haven't wrote that down, but there's also another important part that's he says that Dan Gibson brings up in the this documentary is that also when the Abbas dudes, when they took power and they wanted to get some guy from the Prophet's tribe Quraysh, they went and they wanted to they saw when they had to go to his tribe Quraysh. So where did they go to find these Qurayshi guys that lived somewhere? They go to Humayma. Haven't I prepared this? I'm sorry I came too late to this. I haven't prepared. I have the Humayma. It only exists in a Wikipedia page in Arabic. It doesn't exist. But this place exists only, I think it was 27 miles from today's Petra. And that's a bit far away from Mecca. So if the tribe of Muhammad lives just 27 miles from Petra, what are they doing there? Why are they not down in Mecca?
What time is this? What time frame are you talking about now?
When the Abbasids took power in the early, I don't know exact what date it was. I don't remember. You can watch the documentary yourself. But
what's the name of the documentary? I'll look for it while you're speaking.
Yes, look at it. You can. It's the first thing that pops up on my channel. I posted it on my channel.
Oh.
But anyway, okay. From one thing to another, what should we take next? Okay, we may maybe this is going to be a complete chaotic order here, but we do it like this. In Sahih al-Bukhari, narrated by Ibn Umar, when the Prophet ﷺ performed the tawaf of the Kaaba, he did the ramal during the first 3 rounds, and in the last 4 rounds he used to walk. And while doing tawaf between Safa and Marwa, he used to run in the midst of the rainwater passage. This is another important detail. Oh, there is Humayma. Here's the town that I was talking about for those who know Arabic. So, rainwater passage. Here's another clue from Hadith. From Sahih al-Bukhari. And this thing exists in many different... Allah's Messenger said on the day of conquest of Mecca, there is no migration now, but there is jihad, holy battle, and good intentions. And when you are called for jihad, you should come out at once. Allah's Messenger ﷺ also said, on the day of the conquest of Mecca, Allah has made this town a sanctuary since the day He created heaven and earth. So it is a sanctuary by Allah's decree till the day of resurrection. Fighting in it was not legal for anyone before me, and it was made legal for me only for an hour by daytime. So it, i.e. Mecca, is a sanctuary by Allah's decree till the day of resurrection. Its thorny bushes, important detail, should not be cut, and its game should not be chased. Its fallen property should not be picked up, except by one who will announce it publicly. And its grass, another important detail, its grass should not be uprooted. And Al-Abbas said, "Oh Allah's Messenger," okay, this is not important. So this place where Mecca been should have grass. Next detail. Next. Okay, this one. So this is many hadith that says the same thing, but just for Saracen's sake, because he thinks that Imam Malik's Muwatta and this exists in Bukhari and Muslim as well. But since he thinks that Muwatta is more authentic than Bukhari and Muslim, we're going to read it from Muwatta. Malik related from Nafi, blah, 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 blah. Then he would praise, so blah, 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 blah. He would never enter Mecca if he was coming from Hajj or Umrah without doing ghusl beforehand. When he was near Mecca, blah, 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 and he would tell whoever, no, this is not the one. This is not the one I was thinking of. Sorry that this became so chaotic. Can you say something in between when I'm trying to sort this out?
Sorry, what are you doing there? I just stepped away for like 1 second.
Are they saying anything in the chat? Are they having any questions so far?
Yeah, somebody's saying hi from Scandinavia because they recognize your accent. Somebody's saying you're reading with no passion.
Okay, sorry.
Come on, give us some more passion there. Passion.
I'm going to give you passion.
That's right.
Oh, now it's passion.
Oh, careful with that voice now.
Dude.
When you invoke that voice.
Dude, I came from another thing and I just sat down and I wanted to do this very orderly and anything, and then there is one of these. Okay, good. My goodness. Ad-dunya.
You've got so many screens open there. Holy smoke. All right, carry on, sir. Carry on.
Ad-dunya, where is this dude? It was also dude. But there is one. No, I was showing that. It's just that the translations are so bad. You don't in the Arabic word.
You can translate, right? Or is it quite difficult?
Yeah, I can translate. I translated it. Okay, so I was showing the right thing, but this is from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. But it's also in Imam Malik's, but I don't know why they're not showing it. Anyway, Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned from. He would also enter Mecca through the higher pass and would leave it through the lower pass. This lower pass, I don't know if that is the right translation. In Arabic, it's a thaniya. A thaniya is like more like a crack, maybe you can say. Yeah, maybe pass is you can translate it, but I think a good picture that describes what a thaniya is let's see. You have a good picture of a thaniya. This is a very narrow thaniya, but nonetheless a thaniya. This is from a particular city that we're going to talk about later. But this is a thaniya. Of course, a thaniya can be wider also. So you can say that...
was that cut by humans or was that natural?
No, it's natural. This is cut by, I think it was cut by an earthquake. But a thaniya can be wider also, but it is a thaniya. So when he's entering Mecca, there is a thaniya that is entering. So there's another important clue. Yes. Let's see. Is there anything more? Here's another thing. We read that too, because I think that's important. This is the important detail. All these details sum up to important information. Thaniya. Here you have thaniya. Let's see where it was. So he made them sit. Okay, more passion. During those days, there was nobody in Mecca, nor was there any water. So he made them sit over there and placed near them a leather bag containing some dates and small water skin containing some water, and set out homeward. Ishmael's mother followed him, saying, "O Abraham." This is important again. Ishmael's mother. That's what I'm talked about, where this paran was. Ishmael's mother followed him, saying, "O Abraham, where are you going? Leaving us in this valley where there is no person whose company we may enjoy. No, nor is there anything to enjoy." She repeated that to him many times, but he did not look back. Her blah 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 proceeded. Abraham proceeded onwards, and on reaching the thaniya, they used the word. Good. On the terms they translated as thaniya. She repeated that to him many times, but she did not look back at her. She asked him, "Allah's messenger ordered you to do so?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Then he will not neglect you," and returned while Abraham proceeded onwards. And on reaching the thaniya, where they could not see him, he faced the Kaaba and, raising both hands, invoked Allah, saying the following prayers. "Our Lord, I have made..." Okay, that's not the important part, but the important part, it describes Mecca having a thaniya, and he's entering one thaniya and going out another thaniya and all this kind of stuff. Blah 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 blah. Okay, you know what? Before I go anything further, this was the thing I was going to say absolutely first of everything. Last week, I said something that was wrong. I said that the compass wasn't invented, but apparently the compass was invented in China or something. Yeah, I have it here.
That's okay. We won't go and stone you outside.
Okay, good. But it's like, it was invented, I think it was 200 or 300 years in the Han Dynasty or something like that. So the compass was invented. I don't know if the Arabs had compasses. But that's...
I wonder if I could get Tom Holland on here as well. What do you think?
Yeah. I'm going to say something about both Tom Holland and Patricia Crone. You know what? I realized that I'm going to go and get Patricia Crone's book Mecca and Trade. But now I think it's time for us to go into the different cities. We can add more information later, but I think it's time for us to go into the different cities. So what is my different candidates for being the real historical Mecca? We start with what people today think is Mecca. So this is Mecca where it's today. So we can go down here. We can look at the different attributes. We can first look at, okay, Mecca was never mentioned on any trade route. It isn't mentioned until 741, and then it's not even placed there. It's placed somewhere between Ur and Haran, which is way in here between Ur and Haran. That time's Mecca, did it have olives and did it have grapes? Could you have any such agriculture there? Well, there's absolutely no historical evidence for that. There's no really historical according to hadith and everything. It should be the walled city, and it should be another part. We said that last week, but it's also called as Qura. It's called as the mother of all city, meaning this should have been a very important city that the mother of all cities. I don't know how you should say it, like the original city and the you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, the cradle.
Yeah, there's no historical evidence. Another part that we mentioned last week is that it should be in a valley, and we can look at Mecca today. Is Mecca in a valley? I don't know. I mean, you have a mountain here, but if you're a valley, then it should be a mountain on two sides. I think to say that Mecca is in a valley is a stretch, to say the least. Stop spamming is online. Good.
Have you got a topographical map or something that shows the elevations?
Yeah, you can go down here. You can see like this. You can see the elevations. You have a mountain on this place. We talked about Thania.
It doesn't look like a big mountain. It's just like a bit of a hill.
Yeah, it's just a hill. Or they are quite big if you go back to big far away. But the thing is, the town of Mecca should be in a valley. And there should be a Thania, and a Thania, and he should be entering from one Thania, going out from another Thania. Another thing that you should be a water that, of course, you can't see today because it's built over, but it should have been a water course like here. It should be in a wall city. Where is the wall? Where could they have built the wall? I don't know. There's a lot of things. It's impossible to grow anything that. When we talk about the nearest land, well, nearest land to Antioch, if someone is in Mecca talking to Mushrikeen in Mecca and is talking about nearest land, well, there's to Antioch or to any place in Levant, to call that the nearest land is like, what are you talking about, dude? And no, not Medina. And there should have been a temple to the Shara and Al-Uzza. There's no one have found any remains of a temple to the Shara or Al-Uzza. Tom Holland talked about there should be a place south of the Dead Sea. Yeah, it's south of the Dead Sea, but it's kind of far away. It's when you look at the Quraysh that the Abbasid find, they didn't find them in Mecca. They find them more like in today's Jordan or in today's Jordan. So Mecca, today's Mecca, I think is a very, very bad candidate. It doesn't fit anywhere. Okay, now we're going to examine another. We go up here. We go to Al-Ula. Al-Ula is, or Madain Salih, which is very near to it. Al-Ula, I think, fits better than today's Mecca. If you look at going down here, Al-Ula could possibly be said that it is in a valley. Okay, and you could possibly say that you can enter from a thaniya. Ula is also mentioned in the Qur'an.
It's not a thaniya like you showed before, though, huh? So it's more metaphorical, right?
Yeah, but you could. This is more plausible to say that it is in a valley, because you
that definitely looks like a valley.
You have a little height and you have a
the
little.
hills are quite close, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I can type in Madain Saleh.
Just go a bit slow with your scrolling. It looks like you sort of jumping around a lot.
Yeah,
It's hard to follow.
That I came too late, and so
that's one of your candidates, yes? Okay.
Yes, this is one of my candidates. Madain Saleh. Here you have remains, and this is where they the Quran talks about Thamud. So Thamud lived in this area. One thing about that, there's also a whole surah about it called the Surah Al-Hijr. And also this was, when you looked at the map of the Nabateans, this is like the location of Surah of Al-Hijr. So they talk about the Prophet Saleh and the people of Thamud that God punished, which is one of 4 Arab prophets according to Islam. Hud and Saleh and Shu'aib and Muhammad. So this is Saleh. The problem is this, that in the Quran it talks about this area, but it doesn't talk it in a way as this is the same as Mecca. So this is one of the reasons I don't think that Ula is the original Mecca. It fits better because it's more in a valley. It's at least a bit closer to Sham, but it's still not really good. And it's also in hadith that that the Prophet passed by Ula when he went to, I think it was the Battle of Tabuk or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but he went through Ula and he didn't mention Ula as Mecca. But Ula fits better. Maybe it's possible that they could have grown like olives and things like that, but even that is a stretch. So, but Ula is at least better than Mecca. Okay, we go up a bit.
It's certainly more north, isn't it?
It's certainly more north, but I doubt that they could grow crops like, or maybe they could, but I doubt it. I don't have no evidence.
Are you still going to tell us where Tom Holland thinks it is? Are you going to keep that for later?
Tom Holland doesn't say what it is. He doesn't say it. Tom Holland goes to an Avdat and talks about Avdat. I'm going to come to Avdat soon. Okay. And we talk about Wadi Rum. Okay, Wadi Rum, I actually have a Wikipedia page.
You got all the info there, hey? Multiple pages.
Dude. Wadi Rum, also known as the Valley of the Moon, Wadi al-Qamar, is a valley cut in the sandstone on granite rock in the southern Jordan, to the east of Aqaba. Oh, dude, Aqaba is another such, it's here somewhere. And that's another candidate, but the problem with Aqaba is that it's not a valley and it's down in the sea. And Mecca isn't described like that. Yeah, here is Aqaba. So Aqaba is the only coastal city in Jordan, largest, most probable. This is an old city that, okay, this is the ancient history. Excavation from Tal al-Maghas in Aqaba revealed that the city has been inhabited settlement since 4000 BC. So this at least fit that maybe you could say that is the al-Qura, the mother of cities, because an ancient city. The problem with Al-Uqba is that it's not really in a valley and it's a coastal city, and Mecca has never been described like that. Okay, so Wadi Rum history. Wadi Rum has been inhabited by many humans cultures since prehistoric times, with many cultures, including the Nabateans, leaving their mark in the form of rock paintings, graffiti, and temples. In the West, Wadi Rum may be best known for its connection by British officer T.E. Lawrence, who passed through this several times during Arab blah blah blah. Lawrence of Arabia, dude. But this is a better candidate. Let us than any I have talked about so far. Wadi Rum. So if you look at this, Wadi Rum could be said. You can maybe say that there is Thaniya here. You can see there's a Thaniya. You can say that it's in a valley. It's even called the Valley of the Moon. And I'm not sure there was a temple of Dushara, but since the Nabatean city, it's definitely plausible that it could have a temple of Dushara. By the way, Al-Ula had the temple of Dushara, as I mentioned. So that's also one that fits.
So far, is this your most favorite of the ones you've reviewed so far? Or
as far as those are said so far, I would say Wadi Rum is one of the better.
Okay.
Because it's in Al-Wadi, you can have a Thaniya here. It's an old city, could possibly be called al-Qura. Maybe it was possible to grow some of the crops that is mentioned in the Qur'an. So that's maybe plausible. Before I take Petra, I'm gonna take Petra last, I think. Al-Hijr, or we take Abda. This is the place that Tom Holland goes to in his documentary in the it's called The Untold Story of Islam. So Abda is one of those Nabatean city. It's in the Negev desert. It fits in that way. This was even although it's kind of desert now. Back in the days of Muhammad, the desert was blooming here. All the crops they could grow and everything. And it could be plausible to say that Ishmael might have gone down here. The problem with Abdat, as you can see, is not really a valley.
Yeah, I was noticing that.
It's not really what Thaniya is he going to if it's going to Abdat. Otherwise, it fits kind of well. This is the one, if you just read by the Quran, it's plausible. Also remember this, maybe I can read that one more time. One we have forgotten maybe. This very important clue in the Quran that I want to stress. And indeed, Lut was among the messengers. So mention when we saved him and his family all, except his wife among those who remained with the evildoers. Then we destroyed the others. Every time. And indeed, you pass by them in the morning, musbihin, as I remember, this is when you are in the morning, is no really equivalence in English. And at night, then will you not use reason? So Muhammad is in a surah Mecca, in a surah that is from Mecca, was sent down in Mecca. He's talking to the mushrikeen that they pass by the sites of Sodom and Gomorrah in the morning and in night. And here is the place where Sodom and Gomorrah lived. There's always even I think back then mentions of a church and everything back then. So we can look at the different things. Wadi Rum, is it possible? Well, maybe if they're down here in Wadi Rum and they're making business trips up here, it's possible that they pass by the sites by day and by night, although it's a bit far. If we look at the Ula, yeah, maybe, but I think it's a bit too far. Like, you have to remember that back in those days they traveled very slowly. Bendina, Mecca.
Yeah, there was only one flying horse, eh?
Yeah, there was only one flying horse, and he was only available one night or so. So, so all the saying that someone down here in Mecca, which is away, you have to remember how long distances this is. I also, I will come to that when I talk about Petra, because Anyway, so this is, when talking about Avdat, back to Avdat, it's possible that you can make the trip up there to the site of Sodom and Gomorrah and say that you pass by them by day and night if you're making business trips and things like that. But as I said, Avdat is not in a valley, it's not Thania, otherwise it fits well. Okay, we go here to Beersheba, today's Israel. This is a place I chose because this is a place where there was a well, the well of Abraham. And since we have the well of Zamzam and so on, this well of Zamzam is in the story of linked to the Ishmael story, that they found the well of Zamzam there. So this is something that maybe could fit. This is in a biblical site, and this is, they talk about Abraham all the time, and this is kind of the border. The problem is, it's not really a valley, it's no Thania, and it should have been mentioned. And it's also like too far into the Roman territory of Palestine that it's not, and it's not, well, maybe south of the Dead Sea, but I don't think that. Here's another part, and that is Mamre. And Mamre could have been a very, very good candidate because the Qur'an talked about Maqam Ibrahim, as we read about last week. Maybe I don't know if I should repeat that. But as we talked about last week, here, this is a plausible place for the Maqam Ibrahim. There was a domed sanctuary here, which the Arabs were known to like even before before Islam. So this could be a possible place for Maqam Ibrahim. I don't know if it's a valley directly, I don't think so. It's not Thania, but Mamre would have been a very good place if it wasn't for the fact that it's too deep into Roman territory. It's not really south of the Dead Sea. There's only this thing that we know that there was a sanctuary that was described very similarly to the sanctuary of the Arabs.
So not a good place then. It would have been a good place except for a couple of those problems.
Yeah,
not a good place. Okay, gotcha. Just making sure.
But I'm almost having that they kind of mixed things up and thought that Maqam Ibrahim is this, but then it like made it into Petra. You know, like in the Qur'an they talked about Dhul Qarnayn, which is most likely, or this Alexander the Great, and he was turned into a monotheist while he was a clear pagan, a drunk pagan. So maybe they kind of mixed things up and thought the Maqam Ibrahim. I don't know, but the thing that talks for Mamre is that it is Maqam Ibrahim. The problem is it's not a valley, it's too deep into Roman territory, it's not south of the Dead Sea, blah, 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 blah. If there's no temple of Dushara or what's there.
Okay, so we'll scratch that one out then, shall we?
Yeah, we have to scratch that one. Here is Medinatul Kirk.
That's not south of the Dead Sea either.
No, but yeah, it's south of Dead Sea.
Okay, close enough.
Okay, this is important. I think I have a Wikipedia page. This, I would say, is interesting. Medinatul Karak, as they say here. History. Al-Karak has been inhabited since at least the Iron Age and was an important city of the Moabites. In the Bible, it's called Kir Hareshet or Kir Moab, and he's identified as having been subjected to Assyrian Empire in the books. What was that? The area eventually fell under power Nabateans. The Roman Empire, with support from the Arab Ghassanid tribes, the Ghassanid conquered it from 105 AD. The city was known as in late antiquity as Haraka. Blah, blah, blah. The Byzantine Empire, it was set as bishopric house, the most venerated church of Nazareth. This is an important detail. The church of Nazareth. Remember that the Quran talk about the Christian as Nasara, as Nazareth, what's it called? Nazareans. So the Church of Nazareth was here. So that is remain predominantly Christian and under Arab rule. Well, fits quite well. It's Bishop Demetrius to blah blah blah. I don't know if there was any temple of Dushara, but it's possible since it was a Nabatean place for a while. The problem is, if you look here, it's not in a valley. In fact, quite the opposite. It's on a top. It's on top of a hill, or what you call it. I don't know what Thania you're going through. Maybe if you had it down there back then, but the good thing about Karak, I don't know if you say it in English, is that it's very close to the sites of Sodom and Gomorrah. And now to also have the Rabba, which I have another Wikipedia page. So Rabba is a town in Jordan, in Karak, governed an ancient Aeropolis. This is the name that you will see if you look at ancient map of this time. History. Rabba was formerly known as Rabat Moab. In Hellenistic and Roman times it was called Aeropolis. Its Greek name. It was one of the two leading cities of Karak Plateau at his time. Historical references. Aeropolis is mentioned by blah blah blah. Anyway, this was an old city and so on, and it's clear to the site. You might wonder, why do I go through all this? Because
you're keeping us in suspense here, aren't you?
Yeah, I could be, but while I go through the different candidates here, is because there are only so many candidates. Okay, like there's not an infinite number of towns around there that could be the town. So that's the reason I go through this. Okay, so we're going to Rabbah. It's not really in a valley. What Thani are you going through? The only thing that fits it is that it's kind of not really south of the Dead Sea, but it's near the south of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's an ancient city, a Nabatean city. So it's maybe possible to grow some crops there, at least back then it was. But now we're gonna go to the notorious site. Petra. Okay, what do we have here? As I shown in this picture, Petra. Maybe we should read about Petra instead. We read the Wikipedia page. Bear with me. Doom, 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 doom.
Sure. While you do that, we just welcome Stops, who's been in quietly there for a while.
Yeah.
And
Stop spamming!
And he's remaining quiet.
Remaining quiet.
Yeah. I'm listening intently. I've got my new PC, and this is what I'm copying and stuff and doing and making while I'm listening. So this is actually perfect.
So now you're going to have a super duper machine.
I think this is the last time I'm ever going to build one or buy one, because this is stupid. I mean, I'm sitting fighting Microsoft every single step of the way, trying to get things running the way that they used to run quite well, and now it's not doing what I want. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. The old Nabateans did not have these kind of problems.
Okay, now we're at the ancient story of originally known as Nabatean Raqmu, is a historical and archaeological city in southern Jordan. The city is famous for its rock-cut architecture and water conduit system. Another name for Petra is the Rose City, due to the color of the stone out of which it is carved. Petra is one of the new 7 wonders of the world, blah, 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 blah. Go near to history. By the 2010 BC, some of the earliest record formers had settled in Baida. What maybe is that? Baida. Oh, it's near to Petra. A pre-pottery settlement just north of Petra. Petra is listed in Egyptian campaign accounts and the Amarna letters as Pel, Sila, or Seir, though the city was founded relatively late. A sanctuary has existed there since very ancient times. The Jewish historian Josephus described the region, he lived after Christ, described the region as inhabited by the Medianite nation as early as 1340 BC, and that the nation was governed by 5 kings, whom the names was Rechem. The city which bears his name ranks highest in the land of the Arabs, and to this day is called by the whole Arabian nation after the name of its royal founder Rechem, called Petra by the Greeks. Oh, okay, that's Greece. The architecture of Petra and other Nabatean cities was built during indigenous rule in early antiquity. So here you can see Petra. Petra, the good thing about Petra, it was like the capital of the Nabatean kingdom. It's an ancient city. It is definitely plausible to imagine yourself that someone living in the late 6th century, early 7th century, would call this town al-Qura. I think it was just, I don't remember if it was like 19 years or something before the Prophet was born. There's been a huge earthquake here, which has destroyed much of it. So it was not in its heyday, but it had once been a very important city. We also know that people made pilgrimage to Petra before Islam. We know that there was a temple of Dushara. I think it's this one you can see here. And we know that was a temple for Lat and Uzza, and the god Lat and Uzza. As we can see, Petra is in a valley. As we can see, Petra has Thania. Here you can both call this a Thania, but they also have this smaller Thania going like cracks in between those things. Annoying that it doesn't go from top.
Doesn't look like it's very modern though. There's nobody living around there now.
No, not there. It was also it disappeared. I think it was a Swiss dude that discovered it back on that. But anyway, we know that there was a street that cut this town in two. You can still see like, and in this street was a rainwater pass, as we saw in that hadith. Petra back then had they had surrounding of agriculture, so they it's what was cultivatable land. Yes, 100 years ago you could have more trees and so on. Yeah, there are still some trees and things like that, but back in those days, in the same way as Avdat, as we saw, is not really have any cultivation today, but back in those days they have cultivation. It's possible to grow olives. It's possible to grow figs and grapes and stuff. If you look at if you look at, it's not that far from the site of Sodom and Gomorrah, so it's possible that if you're going like trade, you're having trade trips up here, it's definitely possible that they go there by day and by night, at least those who often go on. And it was a trading hub, and as I said, capital of Nabateans. What have you not mentioned? Now the temple of Dushara, we mentioned. Thania, it said Thania. Also, it's very possible that Safa or Marwa they go up like this in this mountain. What more does it? What haven't we mentioned? It's south of the Dead Sea. Fits perfectly south of the Dead Sea. It's on the border of the what was then the Roman province of Levant. It fits perfectly in that way. It's at least possible to say that someone living there in 613 would say the Romans are defeated in nearby land, as you have there. The kind of in Petra you had both pagans and you had Christians, and like the Romans took over this place, but you have a mix between pagans and Christians, which fits perfectly. I don't know what
Is there anything in there that doesn't fit, that's got a question mark, or does it fit all the criteria you've mentioned?
maybe you could say like this Maqam Ibrahim. Maybe that should be linked to memory, but otherwise it's possible that they would say that but Abraham visited here too. It's definitely plausible because it's not so far away from where Abraham played around, and his son Ishmael. It's definitely possible that he went down here, in their eyes at least, and that's the important part. So
based on all the research and the reading you've done, would you say that's the most likely candidate?
yeah, I would. If I had to bet my money on something, I think I would bet my money on Petra. Yes.
Cool. Somebody in the chat, by the way, just a piece of trivia information. I think it was who was it? Silver Backup, I think, said that Indiana Jones was shot there. One of the Indiana Joneses. Oh, you know that, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. But it's strange that it became deserted. So, is there anything else you want to add? Because that's been really awesome.
That before I was very skeptical to Petra before I made this research. Before I began, because I was very skeptical to Dan Gibson as a person. So it was kind of an ad hominem. My real argument against Petra was a kind of ad hominem one. But after I have looked down to the different candidates and looked everything, I realized that there can't have been that many places that there's not that many candidates, and most of those places can be ruled out. As I said, it's maybe plausible that you can say that it's Wadi Rum.
Did you in your research find out who and why they chose Mecca, the Mecca that we know today, as opposed to?
Well, that was, I think, was a political move. Like, right. If the story is correct, then Abdullah ibn Zubayr, he fled from Medina up to Petra, which he thought was the holy city, maybe, if this is the correct, or Wadi Rum or whatever it was. Then, he dug out he destroyed the Kaaba, dug out the black stone, and then had to flee down to the south somewhere. And maybe he then settled down in Mecca.
And when was this? What sort of time frame? After Muhammad's death, or during his life, or when?
No, we're talking about the time of Al-Hajjaj and Abdullah ibn Malik ibn Marwan.
Time frame for us that don't know those people.
Now we're talking 680s to.
Yes, after Muhammad's, well after Muhammad's death.
Yes, between 60 to 90 years after Muhammad. And then if you look at the coin, like my original avatar for this was Caliph coin. Mm-hmm. So this is the avatar I had there. There's a coin of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, and that was an image, but that was before, an image of him before he kind of made up his mind. But what he probably realized from Abdullah ibn Zubayr was that the power of this guy Muhammad. So since they probably realized that Al-Quds or Jerusalem is too much associated with the Jews and the Christians. So the Ishmaelites needed their own sanctuary. And first their sanctuary was in Petra, but since Petra was kind of destroyed and everything, it was much more fitting to place it down here in Mecca, since maybe Abdullah ibn Zubayr maybe even brought the black stone down there anyway. And then they started, so Abdul Malik ibn Marwan kind of started it, but then it took a kind of a long time. But when the Abbasids took over, then it kind of had been established in Mecca, and then it was kind of beneficial for the Abbasids to place it in Mecca. So then they just continue like that. But it was also very convenient, because then you could put the prophet in the middle of the desert, and you could say it's not plausible that he could get all this information from anyone but God, because he was in the middle of the desert where there was only pagans and blah blah blah. But then everything become mixed up. So they said that Mecca is Qura, but there was nothing really there. And then Petra was kind of forgotten and sunk into oblivion, something like that. And so it was very convenient. And Petra was kind of abandoned, suspiciously enough, in the, I think it was in the mid 8th century, which is kind of suspicious as well. Another suspicious thing that one said in chat that I thought about, and it's actually true, it's very weird that Petra isn't mentioned any time in the Hadith. I mean, Petra was the bloody damn capital of the Nabatean Empire or kingdom. It was an extremely important place, and then just suddenly just disappeared. It is as if someone had an incentive to make it disappear and make Mecca here. So yeah, I have changed my mind. I used to think that it wasn't Petra because I had an ad hominem argument for myself that I didn't trust Dan Gibson, and I still think that he says things like in that documentary, like Masjid al-Haram. He says the forbidden gathering place. It's correct that it was a gathering place and it had an area that was haram. That is correct, as I read from the Tom Holland's stuff. But masjid comes from the word sajada, which means prostrate. So it's more correct to say there's in a place of prostration. So you say things that are kind of bordering on, he's not doing it in a more dispassionate way as I do it. Maybe it's not as fun to listen to me, but anyway, what I want to say is that I think I have changed my mind, actually. I was very skeptical of Petra, and mostly because I had an ad hominem argument against Dan Gibson as a person. But when I look at the evidence, I actually think that Petra is the best alternative.
Cool. Thanks so much, Abu. That was awesome. And wow, you've obviously reminded yourself that we look at the evidence and not the person. Sometimes that's hard to do, obviously, to separate person and information, because that particular person delivers it. You go, well, I don't like the person, so I might dismiss the information. So it's good you reminded yourself of that. But that's awesome. So that's Petra seems to. So there you go. That's obviously Abu's done some research and feels that Petra fits the criteria better than anybody else. Obviously, if people disagree, then feel free to share information or get somebody on here that can give reasons why not. And I'm sure if we have Abu on, he could share his reasons. You know, none of us claim to be historians, but obviously Abu has looked into this, read a number of books, and has changed his mind. So there we go.
Maybe we can do another when I get access to Patricia Crona's Meccan Trade. I can read that book and make a summary of it also. But we don't have to go into that. But the thing is that she says all the things that we says, that Mecca wasn't on any map and blah blah blah. Another thing is, another thing that is an curious thing that I've noticed when you listen to interviews with Patricia Crona, she never wanted to speculate what Mecca could have been. And I don't know, maybe I'm just too conspiratorial here, but I almost kind of get the feeling that she kind of avoids Petra altogether. It's impossible that Patricia Crona can't be aware of Petra because it was such an important place, but she never even mentioned Petra. And I almost kind of get the feeling that she kind of thought that it was Petra, but she didn't want to say it because she wanted other people to come to the conclusion themselves. And I almost kind of get the feeling that she secretly said this to Tom Holland, because why I don't understand why Tom Holland never even addressed the question of Petra. I never heard him address it. So
well, maybe if we ever get him on here, Stops might I don't know if Stop City's ever been. Honyo has been on some shows.
Yeah, he's been on the Jinn.
Okay, right. So we could always invite him back to the revised version and ask him the question. What's your view on Petra? But yeah, once you've done Patricia's book, then maybe you can give us a sort of a summary of that. If it's the same as this, then obviously you're just repeating yourself. But if there's anything different, then that might be worthwhile sharing additional thoughts. Let's put it that way.
Because I'm skeptical as well.
Of Petra?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a couple of things that don't match, that don't mix, that don't gel, that simply don't work. Nabateans in general, we don't know why they disappeared. They disappeared around, 300 something, but nobody knows why. It's just poof. I mean, this was a thriving civilization. They were on top of the old northern part of the Arabian Peninsula, and suddenly poof, they were gone. They
were absorbed by the Romans. But why is that an argument for Petra being?
No, we simply do not know. We do not know why Petra, being a Nabatean capital, should at the same time be the capital for Muslims. I mean, you need to remember this came about from Damascus. So Damascus was looking for some obscure place to make this a place of worship. That they didn't really want a well-known place, I think. They wanted it just like the Christians took Nazareth, which didn't even exist at the time. They wanted some obscure little place. And I think Petra would have been too imposing.
Yeah. But look. That's what I'm saying. I think we know that Arabs made pilgrimage to Petra before Islam. And it fits all this thing where they had the Temple of the Shara, and it's mentioned that the Arabs had a temple south of the Dead Sea. But when the Arabs got into power, they had incentives to move it down to Mecca because they wanted it.
I agree. No, because look, in Petra, you had all these statues. You had the goddesses, like all these different gods and shrines and all these things, which obviously Islam wanted to avoid. So there was definitely reason to move it away from there.
And another thing is that the Quran talks about a lot of like earthquakes and things. And there's even a surah called Surat al-Zalzala. And Petra had many earthquakes. There's also this Wadi Bakkah. It's called Bakkah in the Quran all the time, except for one place, which probably is changed.
Question for you quickly, Abu. You, what a mate is asking, did you cover Kufa? And you did, didn't you, earlier on? But you also covered in the previous part, didn't you?
Yeah, but Kufa doesn't really fit. I didn't bring it up as a candidate.
No, not one of these cities, no.
But what I did, I brought up Al-Hira, because there at least we know that there was a temple for Dushara. The only thing that could be, Al-Hira. The only thing that Al-Hira fits is that this guy, that's the first time Mecca crops up is in 741, and then he places it somewhere between Ur and Harran, and Hira is like here somewhere, in this area somewhere. I don't know if it's this one. No. Anyway, in this area somewhere, and that's maybe. But the thing is too. First, it's not a valley, and it's too.
It doesn't meet the criteria, does it? Yeah,
it doesn't fit a lot of criteria.
Yeah, but you did mention it in previous episodes, in previous parts anyway, didn't you? So
no, I mentioned it this time with Hira. What was it? This.
Another question for you here. Okay, now we're going off topic, so I just want to make sure that we're finished with this, or if not, then that's fine.
Don't worry, we can mix.
Okay, cool. Question: where is the muddy pool where the sun sets? We can harness the energy and save humanity.
In my garden.
Yeah.
Good question. Next question.
Yeah, so if you've got any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. open Q&A. So somebody did come in earlier. I cannot remember their username. I invited them in and said, hey, if you want to ask me questions, come into this, because I can address some questions a lot more fully or comprehensively, potentially, here on the chat than trying to do a long YouTube comment. So if you are listening, JB or JT, Pothole or not Pothole, I forgot the username. Feel free to ask those questions now. If anybody wants to join the chat to have a conversation, then let me know. You've got to friend me on Facebook. I can give you the link again if you want to, and then I can give you the Hangout link if you want to join us.
This is what is at Hira, for instance, there stood two stones sacred to a god named Doshara, which his worshippers would regularly make sticky with gore. A second deity, Al-Uzza, the mighty queen, was graced with an even more spectacular draught of blood when Mundir sacrificed no fewer than 400 Christian virgins in her honor. But as I said, there were many places where you had a temple of Doshara, and Petra is just one of them. And Ola also have. I would actually say that Ola, I would say, is better than Hira, I would say, because at least it's plausible area.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Good job again, Abu. That's shared some interesting history, which unless you're really into that sort of thing, most of us probably wouldn't have taken the time to go and look into. You know, when you're not going that deeply in a particular area, you kind of accept what most people say as the history, because you assume that the quote historians are reasonably accurate. And again, I guess it depends which historians.
It's very important because, you know, I have made Hajj and Umrah many times. So the thing is that all the times I made Hajj and Umrah, I made it to the wrong place.
Well, now you should do it to the right place. I was thinking about that, actually going to visit Petra. It looks like a pretty amazing place with all those things cut into the mountain and stuff. And maybe there's a Indiana Jones tour as well. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of fascinating historical antiquity, be it the buildings and where people used to live, and it's all kind of around that area, isn't it? So
here's what it looks like in night. Kind of beautiful place.
Yeah, wow. That's amazing, isn't it? Wonder how long it took them to carve in there, and what's inside there. I mean, I don't know if the Indiana Jones actually used the inside or just used the outside.
That's another thing that we maybe haven't brought up completely. That's they had many graves carved out in the stone. So I think this place was, I don't know if it was partly used as a treasury and partly as a grave, or I don't remember the story correctly. But they have many graves carved out in the mount, like in this stone mountains surrounding there. So that's another thing that they could have called it Bakkah, the valley of Bakkah, is that they had so many graves, so there was a place where people cried on, as well as there were earthquakes.
I'm guessing there's no there's no chalice, is there, in there? You know, the cup that Jesus drank from. I'm sure that's not in there, is it?
No, you mean the Holy Grail or what?
Yes, that's what I mean. With an old soldier guarding it.
Also thinking of
because it's amazing to look at the stars there as well. I'm guessing it's when they haven't got all those candles on.
I have been in you know, in Arabic countries, when you go out in the desert at night, you can really see the star. You can see the Milky Way and all this stuff. Milky Way.
Cool.
Here's that one. Wait a minute.
Somebody mentioned the Transformers has also been, I don't know if it's been there exactly, but in that vicinity. So it's obviously popular for some movies.
Here's the in the Bible psalm. Blessed are those whose strength is in you, who have set their hearts on pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of Bakkah, they make it a place of springs. So there's a spring, maybe Zamzam spring. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength. Go from strength to strength, like between Safa and Marwa, till each appears before God in Zion. I don't know, but this is a psalm in the Bible that Muslims want to say that this is Mecca. But where is this Wadi? Bakkah means like in Arabic, Bakkah yabki means crying. In Hebrew, it's something similar. So the valley of crying. But I don't know if this is the same valley as we're talking about.
Yeah. So if you're a Muslim in the chats, Muscular Beast and others, if you've got any questions for us, or if you've got any statements, or you want us to chat about anything in particular, then now's your opportunity.
And what they think about this, that Mecca.
Yeah, they might not have
How
done
can they
anything.
defend Mecca
There's
being...
another question which lends itself here. Why is it that we have absolutely none? We have 000 information about any of the sites mentioned in the hadiths. And I don't quite understand why it is that Muhammad says he was supposed to have gathered together all these tribes, but nobody actually goes and says where they came from and how we can actually check this. Did you find anything in any old text saying anything about this?
I mean, this is another thing that fits, like, if not Petra, at least the region better, because when they describe all these things, like there are many hadiths that talk about, like, for example, this hadith that Muhammad's father Abdullah went, he had I don't remember how many wives, but he went to the first wives and he said, "Oh no, you're dirty with soil," because they had been out farming with his soil, and the word in Arabic is tin, which mean kind of like clay, or which is all like cultivable, like soil. And a lot of hadiths that talk about things that doesn't fit Mecca as a region when they're talking about Mecca, but fits much better. And this is not just one hadith, there are like many hadiths, and also in the Sirah and everything. So both the Qur'an and the hadith themselves and the Sirah talks about this Mecca place as being more fitting to the region south of Palestine or Negev or something like that. You see what I'm saying, man?
Yeah,
Capiche?
we hear you loud and clear. And this is exactly the point. This is why I don't even understand why people come and they say, well, there's loads of evidence that Mecca was a trading center. And there's zero.
There's definitely zero. That would be interesting to hear Muslims, how they can defend today's Mecca being Mecca. That would be interesting. If they have any arguments for it, or it's just, well, it says so in the tradition. Do they have any? Well, I will open the chat and see if I can find.
Yeah. There's a question. Why does Allah say this book is perfect guidance? This book is the right way, but the Quran wasn't even a book then. It was just recited.
Well, that you can. It's easy to stretch such things. I don't know what exact words is he referring to.
Dan the man, if there's a particular verse you're referring to, let us know. Or is that just your sort of summary of what you think?
I want to know what the word in Arabic is.
Yes. So for those who are new and don't know, Abu is fluent in Arabic, so he will always be able to tell us what Arabic words mean. Of course, you can go and look it up as a translation, but we have somebody here who can understand it fluently, so why not ask, and then he'll give you his translation.
Abu, did you study ancient Arabic as well?
Not as well. I only studied ancient Arabic.
Ah, okay. I thought you also spoke MSA.
No, I speak, but that's because I lived in Arabic countries. But
okay, this is exactly what I mean. You cannot speak ancient Arabic. It's a dead language. You need to study it.
No, I can speak ancient Arabic. I speak ancient Arabic better than colloquial.
Yeah, but you can't pick it up. You can't learn it like you do standard Arabic. You need to study it because it's not a spoken language as such.
Yeah,
The
it's a
only
bit
reason
like
why
Latin.
you go and read ancient Arabic is to read the Quran. That's it.
It's a bit like Latin. There are
Oh, ancient
people.
Greek. Yeah, of course. Okay, but then if we are talking about Mecca, if we're talking about the uncertainty here, if we're talking about all the mis and disinformation that we are getting around all this, since we seem to be lacking a topic, why not go one step further and do what I always ask: what then is true in the Quran? Is there anything that is correct, anything that you can verify, that you can test, that you can then say, hey, yes, this matches reality? Is there anything in there that you can do that?
I mean, I think that many of the surahs that, like for example, Surah Taha, Surah Maryam, those like old surahs, I think we have good reasons to believe that they are authentic, because they don't.
No, that's not the question. The contents, whether anything that is said in the contents is verifiably correct.
Well, can you explain what you mean?
Okay, it mentions Mecca, and we have the story around Mecca, but we know that the Mecca, as is discussed in the Quran and the Sunnah, does not match reality. So if we go and we try and verify what it says about Mecca, we find, it's not true. Now, is this different for anything in the Quran?
I mean, it talks about, for example, when it called about Thamud, which they pinned down in Madain Saleh, at least that fits. That's a real historical site and so on. So that's at least fits better. And you say, for example, Ghulibat al-Rum fi adna al-ard, they pinned that to the Battle of Antioch, or at least some battle in that war. So there, at least, we have something we can talk about.
Sorry, I didn't understand that. What do they say?
Like in this, the battle where, like, the Romans has been defeated in the nearby land, and they will.
Yeah, but you can't verify that.
Nah, but since it is about from that period, it's kind of easy to.
But this is you don't know what Romans, where, how, when. You have no information against which you could verify it.
Yeah, but it seems like you have an say that you have a letter written during the American Civil War, and he talks about something and refers to it, so you know that okay, it can only be the this battle, whatever battle it was. And you
exactly.
and he talks about a general, so it should be Robert E. Lee, and a general of the Confederates, and blah, blah. But he doesn't mention him by name. But you can deduce who it should be.
Exactly. But in the Quran, you can't do that because you have no information.
Yeah, it wasn't composed. The guy that composed it probably didn't understand that it would become a very important text in the future. It would be very helpful if you could help us pin things down.
This is why I'm asking, is there anything in the Quran that is verifiably correct? Or then the other thing, you said something very interesting, which I hear a lot. These are the Meccan surahs and the Medinan surahs.
Yeah, but I mean, according to their tradition. So I'm used
to establish that. Is there consensus on this?
I don't know if we can be historically. I don't know if but I mean, according to their tradition. So now I'm speaking to Muslims. Like, yes. Look at what you say. You said that when Muhammad was in Mecca, he said this. He said that to the mushrikeen in Mecca that they have olives and grapes and all that stuff.
Okay, but what I'm saying is there are people who are claiming that there are sentences in the Quran which are typical of the Meccan period.
Yeah, that's also another thing.
Have been in Mecca and received these specific sentences.
That's another thing that is
classified.
This is another thing that makes the whole story even more complicated, because when you read the Quran, I get the feeling that it's written by more than one author,
Yes,
because
exactly.
one of the as I said, these old surahs like Surah Taha, Surah Maryam, and Surah, like these surahs have a particular style, but then you come to like Surah Nisa, has a completely different style, and it is as if there was one author that wrote Surah Taha and Maryam and all those, and one that wrote Surah Nisa and Surah Toba, definitely different style.
Yeah, because I mean, which one is it? Is it 41:1? No, chapter 41 was definitely written by Hamid Maududi. This is why in the beginning it has his initial HM. So he must have written it.
Yeah, that's also an hypothesis that the Alif Lam Mim and Alif Lam Ra, that these are like initials of some guy that wrote it down or something. That is not really a part of the Quran.
Okay, but the question that I asked, is there any way of establishing which is a sentence from Mecca and from Medina? This is also arbitrary. This is just something, I think this is from here.
I don't remember if
Consensus on this is there.
I don't remember if any historians have. That's a good question. I will keep it in the back of my mind. And unfortunately, I don't do this full time, so.
Yeah, it's a pity. Hey?
All good, all good. You did a good job there, Abu. Thank you so much for that.
No, there's a lot of research there. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of material. There's a huge amount of reading that you did to cover all that that material that you went through, and that is very thorough. And I like this that you went very deep into all the alternative ones as well. You didn't only stick to one guy or something and just copy it. So I think this is a job well done. Yeah.
As I said, like before I started this research, I was very skeptical as Petra, and I was especially very skeptical about Dan Gibson as a person. And I'm still kind of skeptical as a person, but I realized that my arguments are kind of ad hominem.
Yeah, but Dan Gibson is a guy who knows his stuff. So
yeah, but I always get the feeling that I don't know what I get this feeling that is, but maybe that's just because I have some kind of weird bias because I think he's a Christian or semi-Christian or something. I don't know. I don't trust Christians. And this Jay Smith guy that is in the speaker, is he there in the speaker's corner now? So, Rob.
Oh no, he's gone back to the US now. He came all the time, and he just has gone back. So some of his students, pupils, colleagues, whatever you want to call them, are now there. They're not standing, not that often anyway. Or maybe they do. I didn't see them this past Sunday. But no, he's left now back to the US. To the relief of some Muslims anyway.
You're going to open up Speaker's Corner in New York now.
Yeah, possibly. But
otherwise, it would be interesting to have him on the show or his students. But the thing with Jay Smith, that what annoys me with him is that he has like this uber Christian style. He's like preaching and having this Christian, and then you went to. He's doing it very passionate.
Yeah. I mean, he's obviously a passionate critic, whether you agree with him or not. And I spoke to him once, and he said to me, "I don't really challenge atheists." He said, "I'm focused on Islam. That's it." I went, "Okay, cool, no worries." Because also I found out he was a young Earth creationist. I'm like, really? Holy crap! Couldn't believe it.
Yeah, so that's what annoys me with him. But that's not really an argument. It's possible that a Christian can say. I mean, Isaac Newton was a Christian. I mean, it doesn't make his. But yes, that was my real argument before. That it was kind of an ad hominem argument.
But is Jay Smith really a young Earth creationist, or is this the role he plays? Because I find that nothing about him is genuine, real, or I find nothing there. He just delivers the lines. I've noticed this when he is like with two people. It's not it's not a debate. Each one just gives their own sermon, but then he will say to the guy, "Okay, well then give me another 50 seconds. I will repeat this or something. Okay, now it's your turn. Okay, is it me now? All right, then let me go." And boof, and it's like you are pushing the play button on a recorder. He will go and just deliver his lines, and he will deliver them passionately. He will deliver them well, but is he really behind them? This seems a bit like what was this guy? David Silverman was on the show of the Fox News guy, and the name escapes me at the moment, who was fired for sexual abuse. And he said, I'm not really sure whether this guy who is pretending to be a young earth creationist is actually a Christian. He could very well be an atheist who's just playing the role of being the baddie on Fox News. He says it's actually amazing how rational he is when you talk to him off camera.
He's been doing it for 20 years. So either he's like got a Hollywood style, acting skills, or there's something there. I tend to take people at their word. I mean, obviously, if I find out they're dishonest, that's fine. But if somebody says they're a Christian and profess it and talk about it, I've got no reason myself to disbelieve them until I can find some evidence of it. So I don't know. And you see I've come across on occasions. I mean, I don't really look at his stuff that much, but I've come across him doing long lectures in big Christian churches and stuff as well, and quite educating the American evangelicals about Islam. Apparently he's been studying for 20 or 25 years, whatever that means. There was a response here from Muscular Beast, who's a Muslim in Scandinavia. Jinn&Tonic show the Britisher asked for Quran verse. My answer is chapter 30, verse 41, verse about environmental pollution. I don't know who asked about that, but we can certainly look that up.
What is that, 30?
That's chapter 30, verse 21. So if you get it there, Abu, maybe you can read it. I'm not sure. Maybe it was somebody in the chat that was challenging him on that. I'm not sure.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Chapter 41, verse 41. I'm not sure what.
Okay, you have a better.
Mischief has appeared on land and sea because of the mead, whatever the mead is, that the hands of men have earned, that Allah may give them a taste of some of their deeds in order that they may turn back from evil. Okay, I'm not sure where environmental pollution. Have I got the right verse? Maybe you read it there.
I don't know. What's this? What's the name of the surah?
It doesn't say, just says chapter 30, verse 41. That's what I'm looking at. So that's Al-Rum.
Al-Rum. Aha, okay. Okay. I have it here. 21.
41, 41.
41.
Verse 41. Put it on screen for people.
Wait a minute, I'm going to find it. It takes some time to load.
Oh, you're doing Quran.com.
Okay, there. Corruption has appeared throughout the land and sea by reason of what the hands of people have earned, so he may let them taste part of the consequences of what they have done, that perhaps they will return to righteousness. What's Dhahar al-Fasad? Fasad means like, yeah, maybe corruption is a good.
How's it got to do with environmental pollution?
Yeah, but this is the thing when you take, yeah. So the word facade, it's used.
Yeah, he's explaining it. He's saying it show how greed of men lead to pollution and sickness. Does it say anything about that?
No, but look, the word facade is used in modern Arabic.
Yeah,
it's used in modern Arabic, but you have to facade here. Refers to, doesn't refer just to environmental things. It refers to more metaphysical things like sin, I think.
What does the actual word translated say?
Dhahar al-Fasad, like the facade has appeared. Facade means maybe corruption or like bad things.
But it doesn't say corruption of what? What, like the people's minds or thoughts? Or?
On land and on sea.
Yeah, but that your thoughts say people on land and sea can have corrupted thoughts, i.e. they're not following.
It's like the Sodom, like. But he's talking about bad deeds here. Like, say that you go to an area where you have a lot of sodomites and things, then you go, oh, Dhahar al-Fasad. The facade has appeared. Like now, for example, you have all this kind of the Pride Festival or something, and then you have the religious people say, facade.
Yeah, so that's like corruption of what?
Yeah.
Of the meaning of the Quran or the message of the Quran type thing. Okay. The Quran has multiple layers of meaning, not just one. Well, in that case, muscular beast, it can mean anything you want. So if it can mean anything, then it's simultaneously we can, we can dismiss that. So either it's got a clear meaning or it doesn't.
Sometimes you have that is an adequate, like for example in Nietzsche's Also sprach Zarathustra, in the one thing that is lost in the English translation in the beginning, and is that when they say, and thus Zarathustra began his downgoing, they translated, but I think in German I think it's something like Untergang, which means it's a play on word. And thus he began his Untergang, which means both that you go down, but also that it's your undoing, so to speak. And that's an adequate play on words. But in this case, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر, it doesn't refer to environmental stuff. People back then had absolutely no such idea about
No, they wouldn't
the
have.
CO2 levels in the air or something like that.
No, of course not. But again, other people like you say, Nietzsche and so forth, can have ambiguous words, but they're not claiming to be words from a supernatural entity. So, my view is that and again, this is just my view. I mean, obviously it can have multiple layers, but if this book is for everybody for all time, surely it be straightforward enough for me, who's, reasonably intelligent. I'm not super smart or anything, and I can understand words and think about them. It should be pretty straightforward. And
no, but it's possible that the Quran could do such things. I can't think of an example from the top of my head.
Could do what?
But could play on words the same way as Nietzsche play on words and make it a double meaning in one word. That's definitely possible.
Yeah, but is it supposed to do that?
But it's not here.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. But I mean, isn't part of the claim that this book is for all people of all time? So if it's challenging to read in the sense that it has multiple meanings, then obviously me as a person, it becomes a challenge for me to read and understand it. Then I've got to go to somebody else who's going to tell me what they believe.
One such is Surah Tin. I mean, we can go back and find it.
The problem is it's supposed to be guidance. How can that be guidance?
Yes, when it's confusion or double meaning or multiple layers. I mean, if I've got to refer to somebody else that supposedly learned more, that's fine. But then don't claim that it's a book for me. Claim it's a book for the scholars, and they're the only people who supposedly can interpret it.
I mean, here's an example that, like, by the fig and the olive, and this is also related to what we talked about today. By the fig and the olive, and by Mount Sinai, and by this sacred city. This translation is so bad.
Yeah, I don't like the Sahel International. They've modified it. When you look at the old translations, they have really modified it for the modern person trying to change certain things.
Anyway, but what Tini was doing, and by the fig and the olive, that's correct. What Tur is seen, and by the Sinai mountain. The word here is Tur. It's like, I think it's a mountain where you can have trees or something like that. وهذا البلد الأمين, and by this safe, not Amin means, you say that in English. Well, will you give me?
There's my good
safe,
friend.
secure, confident, assured. You don't really have a good word for that.
Yeah.
Weird. Anyway, but Amin means that you feel safe and you feel secure. So, and by this secure land, or in this case they translate as city because there's Mecca, but it refers to this historical place, whatever that was. That might have been Petra or whatever it was. So there is God is swearing by the Tin and Zaytun and Tur Sinin, and by this Belad, by this land. So here the people of Tafsir says that it has double meaning. It has the meaning of the fig and the olive, but it also means the Levant, because here is talking about that the fig and the olive represents Levant, and Tor Sinin represent Tor Sinin, and Hadalbad represent Mecca. Or
why didn't they just put in there? God just put in the longitude and latitude and say, I'm putting in numbers. In time, you will understand what this means.
But in this case,
you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
In this case, I think this is bordering on what I was speaking about. In this case, I think you can, since the two other ones are talking about places. I think this is, you can say that it's plausible to interpret this as Levant. But
why all the interpretation? Why is it just not straightforward?
Because that's how, one of the thing of the beauty of poetry is that you can
but this is not poetry.
In a lot of
direct messages from God for people to follow.
But it's a poetic, beautiful way. I mean, this is, I would say,
either he's making fun of his creation, or he's really not serious.
No, but it's like not like me. He's not doing it in a dry, non-passionate way. God is more passionate than I am.
I don't mind how passionate or not. I want a straightforward, clear message.
Yeah, but
maybe I'm asking too much.
This is the difference between
that I bought a book which is called The Qur'an, a new translation by, and this is Mr. Abdel Halim. This is one that you will find in Speaker's Corner a lot, because this is exactly what Abu just said. This is the new translation. And this is now representative of what Muslims would love to see happening today. All of a sudden, the sperm is no longer produced between the backbone and the ribs because they found a way around it. And now, all of a sudden, this is what you see in this version of the Quran.
Yeah. So it keeps getting updated, which, and then people who don't know anything or not read the old translations, they just go to the new one because it sounds better. And of course, that's more acceptable in the West. I got a quick, here's a question from our infamous friend, Ahmed Mohammed, explaining the origin of life and the universe leads to infinity being necessary, except that he only wants a certain infinity. It can only be a supernatural infinity, not a natural infinity, because of course we don't know whether a natural infinity is possible.
I don't know if that is correct. I don't know
what infinity is.
No, look, as I said before, I'm an infinite guy, so I would bet my money on infinity. But I wouldn't say that infinity is necessary for our creation. You only have to have enough, just enough.
No, what he's meaning there is when you wind the clock back now.
Yeah, but if that enough is 1,000 to the power of 1,000 to the power of 1,000 of any units, whatever you want, particles or space and altogether, I don't know. But I think I'm an infinity guy anyway, but not because of that reason.
I mean, we don't know. There could be an infinity, and philosophy wants to push for an infinity because otherwise there's an infinite regress. And so from a philosophical point of view, philosophers go, well, we can't have an infinite regress. Of course, there's no reason why we can't, other than it just doesn't seem to fit philosophy. And maybe there is actually a knockdown reason why we can't.
Finite mind, our monkey brain.
Yeah, but hang on, I showed you an infinity here on this planet.
What? Human stupidity.
And the imagination of my brain. No. I said if it doesn't matter where you are, you continue east. How far are you going to walk before you get there? That's it.
Yeah, but that's not really an infinity, though, is it? Because you're just using labels to talk about a sphere. So you can walk around a sphere.
Infinity. Infinity is a label. So I'm saying if you walk on a sphere east, you are going to walk until infinity. So that's a real infinity here on the planet.
I mean, one thing you can do if you have a computer program that kind of generates fractals, then it can generate fractals as long as as long as the computer works.
I mean, I was just listening to Phil again. He was talking about the guy that came up with the concept of infinity in mathematics, and he said you don't treat it as a number, you treat it as a set. He didn't elaborate on what he meant by a set.
Oh, now I know what I'm going to do.
But, I mean, I would imagine that most mathematicians say, okay, if you walk around a sphere, you'll come back to where you started. So unless so I'm guessing that they're talking about a set of numbers.
Walk east. No. You can't end and you can't start. Wherever you are, you walk east, and you're going to continue until infinity. or until you die, whichever comes first. But the concept is exactly, it's a set. If you look at infinity, it is not a number as such. It's not the way most Muslims understand that when they quote Hilbert's Hotel. It doesn't work like that.
Somebody, Muscular Beast, is saying, atheists don't want to learn when we Muslims show evidence. Well, please show us evidence. That's what we always ask.
Brilliant. Yes, please. For the first time in the last 1,000 years, we have evidence. Excellent. Where is it?
Yes, Dave is asking, what evidence are you thinking of, Beast? Yes, I think we're all listening with anticipation of the evidence that you're going to provide. And
Bill O'Reilly, that's the one. Thank you.
Ahmed Mohammed there is coming with his philosophical genius there.
We have criteria, which is truth. It's so easy. It's so bloody easy. Truth. That's all it takes. That's the criteria.
Because you guys can't get something from nothing. How you guys argue that I'll never know? Well, that's obviously because you, with all due respect that you deserve, that's just a matter of ignorance. You know, cosmology and mathematics can explain to you how you can get something from nothing. So, and I've explained it, and so has Carlo, so has Phil, and so have cosmologists. So the fact that you don't understand it just means you haven't looked into it, or you don't want to understand. But there are explanations for how that can happen. So I would encourage you just to look into it, get a bit of an education. I know it might shake your worldview a little bit, but you know, that's what honest intellectual pursuit is all about. But
next week I'm going to show up with a infinite icon, an icon of infinity. I'm going to see what it's going to be.
Speaking of, what shall we do next week? Now that now that I'm thinking about it. And so you've been very quiet.
Video. You wanted to make your video.
Yeah, we can do it. I've just got to find the best way to actually get the audio to play. But I had a critique video for tonight, so we can do that next week. So we'll critique a video. I'll have a look through, see if there's anything better. I had to raise the audio in the one I was going to do, which was actually with Mansour and another atheist. And actually the atheist made a few mistakes as well. So I thought it would be useful to do that one and obviously critique Mansour's view of something from nothing type of thing and the atheist kind of explanation. But again, you know, nobody's a walking encyclopedia. So this is not to make somebody look silly. It's rather to go, okay, here's a few things where, you know, he perhaps misspoke. We all do. I always misspeak. So does everybody, you know. So it's really just an educational thing for me to go, okay, here's something that they've said wrong on both sides. So it's not just a one-way street. But there was one, by the way. Go listen, guys. I will give you this one that I thought was actually quite interesting. Hijab was speaking to, I'm guessing it was an atheist. He never actually said, and I'm going to give you, here it is, I've actually got it. Hijab was quoting, was claiming obviously that they have objective morality. So I'll post it in our post there for you guys to look at, and for everybody else, go and watch this one. This guy seemed to have some idea of what he was talking about. I posted it in our special group, and I said, you know,
yeah.
So, and of course, Hijab danced around when the guy asked him, how does God know that he knows it's best? Because obviously Hijab's sort of non sequitur was that God is objective morality. And I thought about that, and it's essentially appealing to an authority. So if an authority essentially has all-knowing, therefore he's the objective morality. And that doesn't follow from my point of view. Maybe you guys can clear that up for me. If somebody's all-knowing, that doesn't necessarily mean that he can be objectively moral, other than he just says he is. Because he could just say, you know, all-knowing means that I know that killing children at a young age is a good thing because they're going to go to heaven, so they'll be in heaven quicker. Now, if that's the case, is that objectively true? And by what standard? His all-knowingness? I can't see how all-knowingness justifies or in some way is evidence for something being an objective truth. It just seems to me that the argument is, most theists, not all, but most theists, is that God is just objectively the lawgiver, just because he's a divine authority. And that, to me, it needs more than that to make that case. Oh, there we go. Beast is giving us some other passages there. Verse 44, 10 to 11, environmental pollution and global warming. Oh, my word. Right. Let's just go there. Why not? We've got the time. Verses 10 and 11, still in the same... no, so that's verse 44, not 30. Verse 44, which is Ad-Dukan. My pronunciation is terrible. D-U-K-H-A-N. Dukan. Ad-Dukan. So
Dukhan.
There you go. Thank you. Yes. And that's number
smoke.
That's number.
Is the same? Is it the same?
Let's bring it up and have a quick look and see if this is our environment. I don't know if he's trolling, if he's being serious. But let's assume he's being serious. Let's have a quick look here. Then watch thou for the day that the sky will bring forth a kind of smoke or mist, plainly visible, enveloping the people. This will be a penalty grievous. Okay, let's just go back a verse or two, and let's go forward a verse so we can get more into it. Yet they play about in doubt. Then watch thou for the day the sky will bring forth a kind of smoke or mist, plainly visible, enveloping the people. This will be a penalty grievous. They will say, "Oh Lord, remove the penalty from us, for we do believe really." So this again is just a threat that if you don't believe, something grievous is going to happen by the Almighty.
But this is not today.
No. So this is just a threat at that time. Hey, if you don't believe, I'm going to bring forth this mist and envelop you, and it's going to be very unpleasant. And then you're going to ask for, or then you're going to claim, no, we do really believe because we're unhappy or we're sad or we're fearful or whatever the case may be. The leaps that people are making, this is what it goes back to again. It's something Christopher Hitchens said, religion poisons everything in a sense. And the critical thinking, I mean, how do they get to this? Somebody must sit down and just, maybe they've got a whole list of first world problems today, and they are just like choosing, wait a moment, hang on a moment, that'll envelop them, it'll bring down a mist or smoke. Okay, so there's smoke out there, that's CO2, and that's infecting the environment. Okay, that's environmental.
But now this is on the day of judgment. This is now.
Was this, but I didn't say that. I'm only reading a couple of verses here, so I don't know if this is in fact the day of judgment.
He's talking about the day of judgment.
Oh, is it? Okay. See, I didn't know that. I'm just reading a verse above, and I'm just reading it as it stands there. But if you say in context it's judgment, well, then it's obviously got nothing to do with that, is it?
They talk about
unless they are claiming
day with capital D.
Well, unless what they're claiming is the day of judgment is when the earth is completely polluted, and then suddenly.
The thing is with the day of judgment is like everything will be kind of peace and quiet, so to speak, and then suddenly everything will like it will be like earthquake, and the stars will rain down on earth, and everything will be very unpleasant.
Yeah, but a lot of these things is more like it's telling you a story, and it includes maybe some metaphorical language to get the story across to the people of the time, so that they, pay attention. Because you could just say it much more concisely, but if you maybe throw in a bit of metaphorical language, then maybe there's a bit more, how would you say, force to the language, force to the message. But then what I notice is Muslims are trying to take some of these words out of what seems to be a metaphorical, message, and trying to apply it to today.
But it's not metaphorical. It's talking about what's physically going to happen on the day of judgment. It's not metaphorical. It's going to happen. It's going to be dukhan. It's going to be smoke, and it's going to be
actual smoke, or is that just a metaphor for God's wrath?
Smoke, and it's going to be earthquakes, and it's going to be raining down stars and whatever.
Raining down stars. Okay,
but none of that has actually happened yet. So
how it rains down stars, I mean, that's impossible, isn't it? Because
that is one of the first doubts I had.
Yeah, but I mean, if you talk about stars, unless you're talking about meteorites, but meteorites and asteroids are not stars, so
that's the excuse that they say. That's
the reason.
The Earth.
Can I just say, Rob? The reason for that is because at the time of writing, the human beings who wrote the Quran, when they looked up in the sky, they couldn't really tell the difference between the clouds, the moon, the sun, or the stars. They were all interchangeably far away. So obviously, there's other places in the Quran where it says that the heavens are adorned with these lights, and basically it writes in the frame of mind as if the stars are literally just as far away as the clouds. So whoever was looking up in those times didn't have telescopes. They couldn't tell that these things were literally trillions of miles away. They thought they were just as far away as clouds and birds even. So
no, I know that.
Easy for them to drop.
I know that, but then this book is obviously supposed to be from God, so he wouldn't make those mistakes, because we know that it's impossible for a star, by cosmological standards, to impact the Earth. The Earth would get
Yeah.
incinerated.
Here you have a
stars
good,
are
here you have a
close.
good example.
It's
And
just
we
not possible.
and we have made we have s- and we have certainly beautified the nearest heaven with stars, and have made from them. Here they add from, but that's not correct. In Arabic, it's وَجَعَلْنَاهَا, and we have made them, not from them. What is thrown at the devils, and have prepared for them the punishment of the blaze. So the what probably happened was that the Arabs looked out up in the sky and they saw a meteorite. You know, when it's look like a star is falling.
Shooting star.
We even call it today. We see a star falling. What do you call it in English?
Yeah, shooting star.
Shooting star, and you can
It's just
wish
an
it on
asteroid
something.
or a comet.
So they believe that there actually was stars there, like little lamps, and then when a devil came too close to heaven, they throw down the star on it and like, ah! You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but this is all scientifically incorrect. So
Yeah.
if you're going to use those words,
But this shows like how ignorant the author of the
But
Quran
now, if you
was.
look at that verse, let's just bring up your verse again there. So if you look at that verse, and we have certainly beautified the nearest heaven with stars, and have made
Not
them,
from, made
Yeah.
them.
them. What
Ruj.
is thrown at the devils, and we have prepared for them the punishment of the blaze. You know, when I read that verse, that to me is all metaphorical. If I was in the 7th
It's
century,
not metaphorical.
Oh, it's
There are
all
hadith that talks about this also, that
okay.
when the devils comes up too close to the heaven, then the star is thrown at them, and so they don't come too close to heaven.
How do people believe this sort of thing? I mean, it's just
Yeah, but it's not so crazy. Like they didn't. You have to
No, but today,
understand.
not then. Today. I mean, obviously, in those days, I can understand people were mightily ignorant, and they just believed whatever they saw, which is, that's not unreasonable at that time. But we know so much more now. I mean,
But today they kind of excused it and said, okay, but the word nejm doesn't mean jalna. Okay, here's not the word nejm. Here's the word masabih, which means like lamps or light and light.
So that's metaphorical, or is that supposed to be real?
The problem thing is the shiny, but they kind of say that that it doesn't refer to the stars, which it does, but it refers to the small stones that go into earth, and that God perfectly puts them in order so that when a devil goes up and try to reach the heaven, then God sent down this stone and it burns in the atmosphere, and then they hit the devil. This is how they explain it.
Can I say something here about Arabic?
Yeah.
Obviously, Rob, you know that we go through these discussions quite a lot, and what I find, and what I'm sure we all find, is that you said that it's so amazing that people in this day and age still believe this stuff. I mean, it's so amazing that people can convince their own minds that this might possibly be true or relevant even. But I kind of see that how it's possible because of the brainwashing thing from birth. However, there's another thing. When it comes to the explanations, what you often find is, for example, this insistence on understanding Arabic in a particular way. Now, it just baffles me that this language of Arabic is so transmutable, is so interchangeable and poetic and abstract that it has satisfied various groups of Muslims in 1400 years of hundreds of different places and civilizations, and they've always been able to somehow misconstrue it so that Islam, if you read that Quran in a certain way, it satisfies perfectly liberal norms and values of a Western society. If you look at it a different way, it gives you Saudi Arabia. And this has been happening for the last 1400 years. So this insistence of people saying, oh, but you have to understand Arabic. No, this is nonsense. Why would God choose a human language that referred only to a particular area for a message that he wanted to be spread across the whole of humanity? He could have just written something where everybody comes and looks at it and understands it in their own native language. That would have been quite miraculous, and that would have been very useful as well for his own purposes.
But even if there were some actual miracles on there that were highly scientifically accurate, that would have been food for thought. Now we would all be sitting up going, how the hell do we explain this? if they had actually explained, you know, dark matter, dark energy, you know, the
Yeah.
expansion of the universe from a infinitely small point, and that the
Yeah,
Earth
I mean-
came around 9 billion years later, that would have been, even if the people at the time didn't understand that, if there's supposedly these messages.
Rob, if it was actually there, then surely you would be able to demonstrate that if it had somehow led to these developments and understanding. But no, for the like 900 years that the Quran was around, and human beings generally thought the Earth was flat, or even Muslims were saying, "Oh, look, the Quran says the Earth is flat," and they would quote things like Dul Qarnun and, you know, rolling out the expansion of a carpet and stuff like that. They'd quote those things and say, "Look, our God knew the Earth was flat, and we know it's flat. Therefore, that's proof." Then, when scientists worked out it's round, they went back and re-examined their meanings, and they constantly do that. A Quran that you had translated 100 years ago would say completely different things about all of these topics because the science hadn't inspired
that's the
people
good
to change
thing
it.
about, I have, for example, Tafsir ibn Kathir right here, so we can go and look what he says about all the different things. It's true, when you go back and read the original Tafsir, you don't even have to go back to like as far as Tabari. You can just take Ibn Kathir or something like that. Then you see they don't say the same things. They say very stupid things. Here another verse. And when the sun is wrapped up, and when the stars fall, then they say disappearing.
Dispersing.
Nah, disappearing I think is not correct. But the pointing is they fall down. And I remember this because this is one of my first shubuhat, my first doubts. I was reading like tafsir. I had like tafsir class, and then we read like it means the star falls down on Earth. What the bleep? A star.
What was the
star is
explanation in your
millions.
class, though? In your class, what was the explanation given?
They didn't give an explanation.
Right.
The problem then I thought for myself, like, okay, but the stars are like millions of times bigger than the Earth. I think if all the stars fall down on Earth, it's like the Earth just going to be absorbed by the stars.
Not even one star could fall on the Earth.
Yeah.
The Earth would fall to the star firstly, but then it would get incinerated way before they made physical contact anyway, certainly with the surface of the star. Just
The whole solar system would be crushed before we got anywhere near it. Millions of miles.
The sun would not be wrapped up. The sun would be swallowed by all the stars that are probably a black hole would be formed.
Again, if you want to go and look at it online, go and look at on YouTube, because our sun is very small compared to the biggest star that they've ever discovered. I mean, it's the same size to the biggest star as our Earth is to the sun. If you go and look, there's a couple of videos on YouTube that show you, and they start with the Earth, and it gets to our sun, and gets to the next biggest star, and they're so until the biggest star we've discovered, and it's so monstrously big that our sun, never mind the Earth, is minuscule.
No, a black hole wouldn't be formed, but it would. Or it depends on.
Depends on the gravity of the.
But a black hole wouldn't be formed, but it would be a mess. If more than one star would like go, how is that even possible? Like, you think how many light years away the nearest star is, and then how long time it takes for them to travel. Of course, God can do anything.
No doubt they've found an answer for this. I mean, obviously this is completely false, so I'm sure the quote scholars have found an answer. Oh no, what he's referring to is shooting stars, not stars.
What they probably will say that the word najm in ancient Arabic doesn't only mean the kind of stars that we all see on the sun. They also mean meteorites and things like that.
It's the translation.
So it's the meteorites that fall.
Yeah, but in the book that I bought now, it's a different translation, and that's all that you need, because here it says when the stars are dimmed.
No. Okay, I have a book here called Mufradatul Qur'an. I'm gonna look this word up. Okay, you speak it.
Yeah, but the stars don't normally. Well, it depends on the size of the star. They normally get brighter before they dim, so they will,
but it's true. So they are dimmed. I mean, it's a matter of translation.
Yeah, I mean, class 1A supernovas, when they explode, or those stars explode, they shine with the brightness of the entire galaxy that they are in. There's a beautiful picture that they've shown showing the Andromeda galaxy and a supernova, and that is the measured brightness, obviously it's much smaller in the size compared to the universe, but the measured brightness is the same as the entire galaxy for about, I don't know, they say 2 months, give or take. So, but here's Muscular Beast.
Krauss did a lecture on that, didn't he? I saw that.
Yeah, that's right.
Was it
Here's,
Lawrence Krauss on that, isn't it?
Yeah. Muscular Beast is, again, TDS Dave is saying he's probably a troll, but Muscular Beast is saying, did the atheist know that the Quran shows the speed of light? And TDS Dave is saying you must be a troll.
But people actually tried that. Come on.
Yeah.
The speed of light. I mean, that's a numerical thing. So why did they get that?
They take the rotation of the moon plus the 5,000 light years that an angel needs to travel, and therefore this is 1 year in the light of Allah, and then they multiply this by the factor, divide it by your shoe size, and then you get the speed of light.
Okay, so they've got a pretty standard equation.
Come on, you guys, quick pop quiz. What is the speed of light in miles or kilometers?
186,000 miles per second.
Yeah.
300, come on, everybody knows that.
Yeah, well, you say that, but given what we're hearing, I think science is just, I wonder if science is seen as like evil or the jinn, or, you know, the jinn's work or something for some people.
Well, I mean, there is quite a strong anti-intellectual streak amongst a lot of these religious types and even the debaters. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them hate science.
Well, they love it when it confirms their book, and they obviously reject it when it doesn't. So it's like a pick and choose. Let's do a cherry pick here. It's the same.
Yeah, they do that. And they do that in the same conversation. Like literally 5 minutes earlier, they'll be saying, science can't prove anything. Science can't prove itself. It's philosophically bankrupt, blah, blah, blah. And the next minute they'll say the Big Bang Theory proves that the universe had a beginning. And you just stand and look at them and say, how could you do this in your own mind?
Yeah, because I don't think that they can keep track of being consistent, because the scripts come one after another. And of course, I don't think they've sat down and actually read the scripts and gone, hang on a moment, this script conflicts with that script over there. We can't have that. So it just comes out like, it's almost like a recording. It comes out. And so they don't even notice contradictions.
Yeah, when they get started on a particular thing, they just run all the way with it. And then something else, you're right, contradicts it. So it only makes sense if they're on a particular script. But if when we get them to jump across scripts, that's why sometimes it works for them, but sometimes it totally exposes their what they're doing. Here's
an example, and I only pick on Ali because he obviously does it very overtly. So he'll go, actual infinities can't exist in this world. Have you ever seen actual infinity? You can't get infinite bananas. So no, therefore, there's no such thing as an actual infinity. And what he doesn't realize is he's falsifying the nothing claim, because you could just, if you're going to be consistent, and I tried this with him, but of course it went right past him. He didn't make contact with his brain. It must have just gone right through like a neutrino or something. But I then said, well, you're falsifying your claim about the universe coming from nothing, because if you are saying that there's no actual infinites, therefore we can't talk about that. Well, we've never seen absolute nothing, so therefore you can't talk about it. So you're falsifying one of your own, claims by making that claim. But he just that just didn't make contact.
And also, they have a problem with eternity as well, or the universe being eternal. So then again, that contradicts it as well.
What's that? In what way?
They also have an issue with the universe being eternal, like backwards. So that again contradicts their reliance on infinity ever.
No, but they are saying there's no actual infinites. But of course, God is infinite, which is a separate case. So they do a special pleading there, but then they think they've got reasons for that. But they're quite happy for the universe not to be eternal or infinite, because then that invokes some kind of a beginning, and that beginning would then require something that is timeless and beginningless. And just so happens that there is something that fits that amazingly, coincidentally. So. Yeah, they're quite happy with that. But if we can show that the universe is in some way infinite, or the particles or the process or whatever is in fact infinite, we don't know for sure. But if we could, then the claim for the God is gone. It's out the window. Goodbye, never to be seen again.
Well, yeah, I'm sure I brought this up before, but I thought about this because I had a debate with somebody about infinity once as well. And Ali Dawa brings it up regularly with his 4 million bananas. So I was thinking about this one night, and it occurred to me that if you made a room that was made entirely of mirrors, so you had 6 walls and they were all fully mirrored out down to the corners, and if you walked into that room and you looked in any direction, all you would see is an infinite number of reflections. because there would be nowhere for there would be no edge of the mirror. Because I tried it in a like in a leisure center where they had two mirrors opposite each other, but eventually the images would go veer off into the side. So I'm thinking if you made a room of six walled mirrors, then obviously there would have to be an infinite number of reflections, because it could only keep going back and forth.
Yeah, it would be infinite in the sense that you would imagine it to be infinite. You couldn't see infinite, obviously.
You couldn't see it, but in principle, surely that's some type of infinity. It must be.
I'm sure man has done that in the sense of like produced something like that. But of course, people go, no, it's not infinite, because you can't see infinite. But the principle is there.
But that's our limitation. It doesn't mean it's not there. We could keep magnifying. You know where the image veers off and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and it looks like the reflections of you are closer and closer together. You can magnify that, and you could keep magnifying it, and eventually you'd see the distinctions between each individual again, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, as far as you can magnify it, eventually the pixels will get so big or too small that you wouldn't be able to make it out. So you wouldn't be able to. Well,
I mean, Rob, I always like to try things out on you, because you're a great teacher, and I know Stops is there as well. So I'd love to hear his take.
But just on this point quickly, people ask, and it's a slight sidetrack. People ask, well, why can't we see the moon landings, the sites where the Apollo's landing? We've got powerful telescopes. We can see stars like 1 billion miles away. Why can't we see?
It's to do with the amount of light. When you're trying to look into something detailed, like a small space, you can't get the amount of light through the lens. When you're looking at something big like a star, and you have a wider lens capture. I mean, I don't know about this. You know about photography. I mean, that would be my
quite like that. I mean, that's kind of part of it, I guess, in a way, but it's not quite like it. It's just that the resolution, and there's a couple of nice YouTube videos that explain it. The resolution is not fine enough. Now, most people's intuition and their experience will go, no, it should be. You've got something that can see, like, planets in the next solar system. Why can't it see what's where the? But it's to do with the resolution.
Look how big they are, though, isn't it? So like you say, the resolution, the graininess of the resolution doesn't have to be that accurate, because the things are so big in themselves.
Yeah. So there's a nice video that explains it.
The other thing is, number one, the resolution doesn't work because you don't have an object that is close enough to the moon. Because look at the size of the moon and then compare that to the size of the lunar lander or something like that. That's frightening. Now, the second thing that people say, well, why don't we send a satellite up there? Well, we could do that.
We've done it. We have done it.
Oh, yeah, but they didn't bring back photos of the landing plane.
Yes, they did. Yeah, it's online. You can go look at it. It's
and the
online.
Third thing is, why don't we simply turn the Hubble telescope around and take a shot?
You can't.
People don't understand that the scope of the Hubble, the focus is so far away that it can't focus on anything. That it's like a super macro function for the Hubble, so it can't do that. So there's a couple of things which are wrong. But the photos that you are speaking of, which I saw when they sent a probe out there to show some photos, this still was not enough. You could barely make out some shapes there, which, again, if you are a conspiracy theorist, you could say, well, these are just fakes that they sent up there by unmanned satellites too, which they just landed there to make it look as though somebody was there.
Oh, well, I mean, conspiracy theorists have got unfalsifiable beliefs. So I don't think you quite right to say you wouldn't take them seriously.
There's a real question in the chat, and that is, if the Quran says that all the prophets are treated equally, how come Muslims love Muhammad more than all the other prophets? It's about God, and God says that all the prophets are the same. But there's also a contradiction here, because Jesus is the only one who was taken up to heaven before the others. So the contradiction that is mentioned here is not a contradiction, and there's another one which is along the same line.
Yeah, but also Muhammad was the last messenger, wasn't he? So, and he corrected any mistakes from the previous messengers, because they don't claim that the messengers are infallible.
No. Why does the Quran say that all prophets are equal?
But I don't know where. Does it say that? Does it actually use those words?
Yes, but it's true, and it does do that because this is in the eyes of God. So in the eyes of God, Muhammad is at the same level as Moses or Abraham or whatever. But then if you look at Jesus, this is a contradiction.
Yeah. Let's just see if there's anything else there. Yeah, you do wonder sometimes if people are just taking the mick or they actually believe what they're typing into the chats. Jinn&Tonic show. The Quran tells Muslims not to differentiate between prophets. Still, they love Muhammad more. Okay, so that's what's just been said. Yeah, obviously I'm not an expert, but I would have said he's the last prophet. He's corrected all the rest, and so he's more sacred than the rest. Hence, and well, I suppose when you say they love him, yeah, I don't know why they love him specifically, just because he's the main character in the book, essentially, or he had the book authored, for want of a better word. So maybe that's why he's like extra special.
Okay, so there's nothing special happening today. Then I can go back to installing my PC.
Yeah. Anything else, guys?
Yes, I didn't find the word in Mufradat al-Quran, but I looked up in Tafsir, Surah al-Tabari. You can see on the web. I'm going to show you the screen. Is it this one? I hope this one.
All you do, okay.
Yes. Okay. So this is like this word. What وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ إِنْكَدَرَتْ. So what does it mean? Like when the stars are falling or whatever it is. So Tafsir al-Tabari say يقول إذا النجوم تناثرت. So tanathara is like dispersed or scattering. من السماء فتساقطت. So they are dropping down. The stars are dropping down. So this is what Tafsir al-Tabari says, and he's old guy, very old tafsir.
He's an old guy.
He's an old tafsir.
One of the old-fashioned ones.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Not this new age. What's this guy here? Abdel Halim. Jesus, what a wanker.
Yes, it's you know, if Muslims really wanted to understand the stuff, they'd, as you say, go read the older translations where there's, quote, less incentive to try and rework them to sound like science, especially if you go prior to 1925.
Yeah, and I heard somebody say this. He said, no, this was Samir. This was Samir who actually said, if I want to debate somebody, I don't want to debate them on does God exist, because they're going to go to Kalam, they're going to go to all these God of the gap arguments. No, let's talk about something interesting. And this is exactly the point. What Abu said, these are the points that people should address. Who was Muhammad? What made him special? And why is Jesus more special than Muhammad? You know, look at the contents of what is being claimed in the Quran, and then go and flesh this out and then make a point out of that. I think I agree with Samir here. This is much more interesting than the question, does a God exist or not? That's stupid. So this has been done, but the interesting parts are actually the contents, the context claims, which I find nice, like the stars. What are stars actually? How are stars treated in the Quran? Things like that. I think it's a very, very nice topic.
Yeah, it is. You're right. But then the other people have got to have a chance to go and read their version. So you could definitely do that and say, hey, this is what it says. The verse, please go read it yourself. What do you understand by this? And then have that discussion and see how they try and make sense of that given science.
Yes and no, because if you go and you collect a couple of sentences on the stars and you say, here I have 15 sentences on the stars, you can read them. They're very, very straightforward. How do you consolidate that with reality? How does that make sense to you? How can you say that the fall of a star is like to the planet Earth? How do you reconcile that with today's knowledge? How does that work? To go and find out how they go and they make things work for themselves in their brain.
Yeah, because I'm sure they haven't thought about it themselves, so they would be repeating something that the sheikh or the imam has said, or they've heard from somebody else, or they might not know, genuinely just might not know. I don't know how to reconcile that, but that's good because then they could go away and think about it. That's always what I want people to do. Go away and think about something that's brought up. You know, it's like you say, it's trivially easy to make somebody look foolish. What? You don't understand this? You've never read your Quran? Ah, you idiot. And there's just no point in doing that. So I would love them to go away and go, because I don't expect everybody like to be a walking encyclopedia. And so go away and, you know, think about this. Come back to me and see if you, ideally, the perfect option would be for somebody to go away and think about it themselves. How does this make sense? Because the moment you go look to other people, you know, now you're deferring your rational critical mind to somebody else. You're not actually being critical. You're going, hey, what is somebody else saying? And I'll go with that because that sounds right. I mean, critically think about it yourself. If you understand science, you know the size of stars, et cetera, and they can't fall to Earth. How do you reconcile that with these passages? It's a good question to ask.
Like, I just want to say who At-Tabari was, so you understand, people understand that he's not any who. Okay, so he was born Anno Hijra 224 and died 301, that is Christian time 839 to 923. Was a prominent and influential Persian scholar, historian, and exeget from Tabaristan, modern Arnol Mazar province in Iran, who composed all his works in Arabic. Today he is best known for his expertise in tafsir, fiqh, and history, but he was being described as an impressive, prolific polymath. He wrote on such subjects as poetry, lexicography, grammar, ethics, mathematics, and medicine. We look at his works. At-Tabari wrote history, theology, and Quranic commentary. His legal writings were published first and then continued to appear throughout his life. Next were his commentaries on the Quran. Lastly, his history was published. His biographers stressed the reverence for scholarship and his keen intent to offer his readers hard facts. Okay, so this is...
Because Saracen likes this fellow, doesn't he? He quotes him a lot. So he's obviously quite a learned guy at the time.
Or all Sunnis like this fellow.
What was his life? When was he around? When did he live?
He was from 224 Hijri, which is 839 to 923.
So that was that the time when there was still like the thinkers before they had the schism and it split off.
No. But this, you have to remember that this is like very, very early. Most scholars didn't appear until this period. So you have Ibn Ishaq, as I understand. We only know of him through Ibn Hisham and At-Tabari, and like, but these are like the earliest dudes that wrote on this. And he's revered by Wahhabis, he's revered by pretty much everybody.
Oh, okay. So he had knowledge in Quranic studies, you said, and history and something else.
And was just that.
But not science or cosmology or...
No. He was even a mathematician, all kinds of things.
Okay.
But the thing is, Tafsir At-Tabari is like one of the absolute earliest tafsir you can find.
Right.
Like tafsir means like, what do you call it? Exeget on Quran.
Exegesis. So he did a study, and this was his sort of manual, for want of a better word, or his explanation for what the Quran means.
Yeah, so that's when I said, when he said that the star falls down, this is what the At-Tabari says. It's not just any who. Yes. Maybe we should find a good hadith of the day also.
Go for it.
But I haven't found one yet. Continue talking.
Cool.
I mute myself.
So I'll come up with a video that I can send you guys a link to. I'll download it anyway. And then we can do a critique next week. Although if Abdullah wants to come on again, then we'll let him come on as a guest again. He might be available next week. And the same for Introverted Smiles. If you want to come on as a single guest, Introverted, I did see your comments in the chat. Just drop me a message, say something in the chat there. Happy to have you on separately, because it's always great to have different people on, obviously. And you can share. Obviously, you did last time, but for those viewers who didn't, it'd be nice to have you on the show here as our guest. So if you're interested, drop me a message in the chat or on Facebook. I think we are linked up on Facebook. So we'd be happy to have you on. But failing that, then we'll do a critique of a video, and we can see what we come to and share some thoughts on that from both sides. Because as I say, the one that I had in mind had a few mistakes on both sides that we can look at. Just having a look in the chat there. I'm sick and tired of being mistaken for a Muslim. Answer. Fake ex-Muslims. Thanks, Silver Backdrop. Silver Backup, should I say, or Back DP. I'll certainly be going down as often as I can, maybe a bit less in September onwards. But whenever I get the opportunity, I will still go down. And I want to have more discussions with people that have the same temperament as Polite Hamza. Whether we agree or not, that's obviously unlikely, but at least if we can have that sort of way of communicating with each other, I think that's extremely useful. That's the benchmark for me anyway, on how to have a conversation. Nobody walks away feeling like they've been humiliated or made a fool of, whatever the case is. And there's time for each person to share their thoughts, and then viewers can comment and so forth. To me, that's what Speaker's Corner should be about. Clearly it isn't. And somebody can criticize me for having my rules, so to speak, but I think that's open and honest conversation. But then again, hey, that's what I want. I understand not everybody wants that, and that's demonstrable. It's just not me just making a silly statement. That's clearly the case with some people. Muslim sick and tired of being mistaken for answer. Mateen. Yes, Hamza was a nice bloke. Certainly in his demeanor and his way of chatting to people. Everybody said that. You know, I've not heard a bad word by Muslim or non-Muslim, although Stops did mention that he wasn't particularly bright on the scientific side. That's fine. Not everybody is. But I was more talking about his demeanor. I'm not talking about his intellectual knowledge per se on specific subjects, but certainly just his demeanor and his way of having a conversation, I think, was, yes, everybody could learn, particularly Darren Hamza, among others. They should all take a class on how to have a conversation from him. Maybe I should get him to, if he ever comes down or whatever, I don't know. I've got his email, actually. Maybe I should try and make contact with him, have him on the show here, and say to him, hey, you need to do a course, how to have intellectually honest debates at Speaker's Corner by a Muslim for Muslims, and a few non-Muslims, by the way, as well. I don't claim it's just Muslims, but they're more likely to listen to one of their own than they are anybody else. So, yeah, he should do that. Maybe he could sell that as a digital product online or something like that.
Well, the lesson is very easy. Shut up and listen.
Yeah. Don't interrupt. When it's your turn, have your say, and then, you know, that's the way you can have a conversation. But of course, there is a fundamental difference, though, isn't there? And I've pointed it out many times. Theistic people have got a conclusion already in mind, and so that the evidence needs to fit that. Non-believers don't have that. We don't know what the answer is in some cases. Some cases we do. But we're quite happy to be proven wrong. If there's actual data that falsifies the current theory or the current hypothesis, then, you know, that's fine. But for theistic people, that cannot be falsified. Otherwise, the entire worldview collapses. And so anything and everything needs to be done in order to prop up a worldview. And so, of course, you get absolutely ludicrous statements and justifications for certain things that you would never make in any other sphere of your life. Well, I say that. I would imagine that most people would never make those sort of justifications in other spheres of their life. Well, I'm going to pray that the plane stays up when I fly to New York because, you know, Allah could be unhappy and he could crash it into the sea. So, you know, nobody does that or tries to make up physics to make them feel good to get from here to New York or wherever the case is.
I have a quick question. What is worldview?
So worldview, generally speaking, talks about like an umbrella term for what do you believe in general about the world. So the theists have got a...
Okay, because people have told me I have a worldview and I maintain I don't. And they said, of course you do, everybody must. No.
Yeah, you do, but you just may not have codified it into like, okay, I believe X. But from everything I know about you, I would say you were a naturalist. In other words, you believe that everything within the universe comes about in a natural way, and that's That's generally speaking a naturalistic worldview. So even if it was ghosts, we would just say that was an unexplained phenomenon that we now explain, and it falls within a naturalistic purview. The only way that our view could be falsified is if in fact we could find out that there was something outside of this universe that was supernatural, that had an intelligence, a world, etc. Because if we found out that in fact, the quantum vacuum was, quote, outside this universe, that would be subsumed under the natural, the rubric or the label of naturalism. But if it was an entity, no, that would falsify our worldview. Then we'd have to say, no, we're not a naturalist. We couldn't say that.
Okay, but if I look at a car, I'm not a naturalist.
Well, you believe that it's come about in a natural way, and
No.
there's no supernatural intervention.
Okay. So, Then it's my misunderstanding. A naturalist is somebody who only excludes the supernatural.
Yeah, or put the other way around, believes that everything that we know of has come about, or even if we don't yet understand certain things, has got a naturalistic explanation in principle, if not in practice. So like the
car doesn't.
Like a consciousness.
But the car doesn't.
Well, it's got a naturalistic explanation for its creation, in inverted commas.
It's not nature. It's not natural. It's very much unnatural.
Okay, yeah, but what I mean is that anything within the natural world is called natural. That's a naturalistic worldview, generally speaking. So whether it's mechanical or whether it's teleonomic, i.e. nature that's creating nature, that all falls under the worldview of naturalism. So anything that happens in this world, contrast that with idealism. So idealism is just the idea that that nothing out there is real. Our brains, it's like being in the Matrix. Our brains are creating the perception that we see. So when you touch something, your computer, the desk, your foot, your arm, you're not really touching something physical, natural. You are touching something that is a projection of your mind. So idealists literally believe that your mind is projecting everything out there in the world. And so but you could be an atheist that is an idealist, or you could be an atheist that is a naturalist, among other views. But those are two of the ones that I just briefly looked into.
Okay, but CRISPR has just managed to fix the first defect, genetic defect.
CRISPR, what's that?
Natural or unnatural?
What do you mean CRISPR?
CRISPR-Cas is a gene edit. I'm a huge fan of CRISPR-Cas.
Anything that happens in this world, in this universe, that's not external to the universe would be considered natural. The only thing that you would consider supernatural is if then you could have a suspension of the laws, for example. So if a supernatural entity dipped his finger in, he'd still be interacting in the natural world, but he'd be doing something that has got a supernatural origin, let's call it that. So the flood. If we found the ark on top of Mount Ararat and we dated it and DNA and blah, 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 and we came to the virtually unescapable conclusion that in fact it was a local flood and the ark got deposited on top of Mount Ararat, we would say that would have been a supernatural entity. The origin of that event would have been, so there's where that would falsify our naturalistic worldview, because now we have a supernatural origin for a quote unquote natural event. That would falsify
supernatural. Supernatural, I understand.
Yeah.
What I don't understand, or what I don't seem to understand, is natural, because for me a tree is natural. But according to what you are saying, it would be natural, because it's also nature. In other words, it is not something that was machined, fabricated, assembled, or whatever. It just comes out of nature, and it's not supernatural, so it's nature. And that's why I don't quite understand, and I don't quite like this idea that everything that is not supernatural is natural.
Okay, but break it down to the fundamental particles. Let's just do it that way. It's easier to understand. All quarks, subatomic particles, that's all nature. That's what a naturalist would essentially call nature. It's just a rearrangement of those particles. And that will explain it for everything, whether it's a car, a man, a tree. I'm sure we all agree on this panel that we're all made of the same stuff, in inverted commas, particles, subatomic particles, whatever. And by that virtue of that would be a naturalistic worldview. Now, if those particles were in some way, if somebody could demonstrate that those particles had a supernatural origin, they were twiddled, fiddled by something external to the universe, that would falsify our worldview. I would then have to say, you know what, I can't be a naturalist now. Yeah. until somebody does that, though, because we're always first going to look, is there a natural explanation for this? But of course, Darren Hamza and some other Muslims, what they are, and I see it again in Speaker's Corner this past Sunday, what Muslims now are doing is they are desperate to push science to one side by two ways. Either by saying that the evidence, we don't want to give you evidence because you're going to reject it. Well, of course, we're going to reject something that we don't consider evidence. Or by saying that science, in principle, can't talk about the supernatural. And I agree it can't talk about something outside the universe, but I do think that it can tell us if there was something that was interacted in this universe. And so, but they're desperate to put that aside, because if they could sideline science, whoa, for them that's one of their biggest challenges overcome. They're not going to do it, but that's what they're desperately trying. I'm really trying. I mean, that's what Hijab tried on Sunday. That's what Hamza's tried with me before, to try and argue that science in principle cannot tell us whether something has happened in this world. And if yeah. And if that were the case, my word, now they're going to think they're on the same footing. And now all they have is philosophy or testimony or whatever. And I encourage people who are listening, who are interested, to go and look up Stephen Law's X-Claim. It's called X-Claim, and it's basically his deductive argument that suggests that we as humans should not take testimony and personal experience from any human about a quote unquote, a perceived supernatural event. And so he's got this argument that he goes into there as to why you should not do that. You are not justified under any circumstance for doing that, given our fallibility. So that's an interesting argument. I'd like to see some Muslims deal with that, but it's still fairly new, and he's only done it this year, so it'll probably take time to go through the literature. So I don't know if you consider yourself a naturalist now. Stops based on what I've said. If you
I'm a naturalist, absolutely, but yeah. I don't see that as a worldview.
Okay, why not? If you understand what worldview is, why would you not see that as a worldview?
No, okay, sorry. I need to update my vocabulary, I think, because what I'm trying to say is I do not apply one single approach to everything that I see on the planet or in the universe. Because if I look, for example, at quantum mechanics, I'm not looking at it the same way as I would look at a piano or a tree. So those three things are very, very different to me. Where, like I said, a tree is natural nature, or nature natural. A piano is still, of course, made up of all these things and is behaving in a normal way, whereas quantum particles are not behaving in a normal way, and I would not take or perceive those the same way as I would go and look at a tree. So I distinguish here. So I would not say that my worldview encompasses everything, because I'm not running everything through a filter the way a Muslim does. A Muslim has to, regardless of whether he's going to the toilet or if he goes and picks a plant or whether he goes and rides on a bicycle, he first has to consult his God whether or not this is okay with this God. And only if the God says, yes, it's okay for you to do that, then he will go and do that. So this for me is a worldview, because everything and anything that you do, you have to run through a single filter. And I don't do that.
You do, you just don't do it consciously like they do. So what you do, though, you assume by default that there's no higher intelligence that is governing the laws of physics.
I see what you're saying. So I can ignore it because there is no such thing for me. So I'm simply ignoring it, so I'm not aware of it, and that's why I'm saying.
Correct. You just operate like there's no supernatural, which means by default that you would be well, not by default, but most probably you're a naturalist. So yeah, you just operate, but you're not going, okay, I'm not assuming a God when I turn the tap. I'm not assuming a God when I go to the toilet. I'm not assuming a God when I drive a car, whatever that is, or get on an airplane or whatever. It's just not part of your makeup. It's just natural, so to speak, in a way. Whereas they are consciously going, okay, when I get on a plane, I might pray before I get on the plane to make sure I get safely there. I would rather look at the statistics and see what the chances are of flight, and we've looked that up and we go, well, it's the safest form of travel. And for me, that would be comfort enough. But some people would deny, the statistics and the empirical evidence. We'll both get there, but I would suggest that my reasons for getting there is more reasonable and demonstrable than their reasons for getting there safely, even if we're both on the same flight. So we get there, but they are
All
getting there by mistake, or they're thinking that they're getting there by mistake, although we're getting there together. I would suggest mine is more empirically grounded than theirs, if that were the case. One person's praying and one is looking at the statistics.
Then I need to update my thinking on this.
Yeah, have a think about it. I mean, if you come back and you still have an objection, then that'll be interesting to talk about, because we all do in some way, even if we don't physically think about it per se. And like you say, I think naturalists don't think about it per se. If you were an idealist, now you would have to, because for most people that doesn't come. When I say naturally, that's not from what I can tell. And again, maybe there's literature that says that. I haven't looked into it deeply, but I'm not sure there's many people that think that would have an idealistic worldview by default. You know, they've just fell into it. They would have had to think about that a lot. It doesn't appear to be real. Now, it could be. I don't know. I can't guarantee that it's not, that we're not in the matrix, as we all know, but that's not how we perceive the world, especially at a young age. We perceive, 3 dimensions and so forth. So a lot of them are arguments or debates or whatever the case is. That's why I think naturalism is the default position. So when you get born as a baby, you see and feel the natural world, you experience the world. I'd love to get into baby's brain, or I'd love to see if they could ever get to a point where they could, kind of explain what they think is going on in a baby's brain when they get born. But I would imagine that the baby would be experiencing the world around it as adults do in some way. It won't be able to explain what's going on, but I'm sure a baby's not coming out of the womb and going, or in any way perceiving that that reality isn't real in the sense that you and I understand it. It's not coming out going, oh, I'm perceiving this world through my perception, and my perception is creating my reality. Because that's what a lot of sort of spiritual people say. My perception creates, in a sense it does, but not in the sense that you and I would talk about. So, interesting. Any quick comments? And if not, we will bring it to a close. Talking about football here. Okay, so people have got bored, I guess, with what we're saying. So maybe it's time to say goodnight. If we go into football, I'm not really bothered. Stop spamming. Face reveal, or is it dangerous for you? Somebody's asking if you'd reveal your face.
Well, is it dangerous? I do not know if it is dangerous. I just had, I had a conversation with Rationalizer, and he said to me, it is a really weird feeling if you are walking down the road and on the other side of the road you see a guy who's obviously a Muslim because he's wearing these cute dresses and this nice outfit, and then he is looking at you, then he looks at you again, and suddenly you see the flicker of recognition go over his face. And at that moment in time you think, okay, should I start running? Should I start worrying? What is it that I'm supposed to do if this guy knows who I am and that I am somebody who is refuting the claims made by Muslims? Because obviously a lot of Muslims hate us. And he said to me, if I would have a choice, I would go and make it undone that everybody sees my face.
Yeah, I can understand why he would say that.
Now, if you're living in the Middle East, it's incredibly easy to have your visa, whatever it is, revoked. They chuck you out of the country within 24 hours, no problem at all. If you are considered to be a threat in any which way, it's very quick that you're going to be out of there. And that's the way that it is. So you need to look at reality, and you need to weigh your options. And is it now necessary for me to show my face? No, not really. I mean, somebody, even Essence of Thought, he said, what you have done is much easier for me. And this is why he went off camera for a while, because he said, no, I actually enjoy this more. And sometimes, yes, I will go on camera again so that people go and identify with a human being behind the voice. Whereas he told me that you are just the voice, but not the face. He says, I am both, but sometimes I would like to be just the voice.
Yeah, it depends, isn't it? Yeah, it's one of those things where, it depends the topic you're on. The topic we're on, there's some people that find counter views quite challenging, and so that can be, and I can't avoid it in Speaker's Corner, neither would I want to. If I'm going down there, it's part of the public. I've got to play by the same rules that I expect other people to play with, so I can't avoid that. So people come over, oh, Rob, I've seen you on YouTube. I don't think, oh, I'm known on YouTube. Nobody does. You just go and have a conversation. There's a few cameras around. You speak to people. But of course, the Muslims have been coming longer, and other people, not just Muslims. They know, and they seem to like the fact that they are celebrities. A bit of an ego boost when people are all on your channel telling you how wonderful you are, etc. And so, of course, that sort of buoys you up. That gives you motivation to come down and do more of it. No doubt they get lots of messages. Hey, you're a great inspiration, blah, blah, blah. Occasionally that happens for me, but I don't, and that's gratifying, but I don't go down there for that necessarily. In a sense, I suppose I do, in the sense that I'd love people to go, hey, I started to think critically based on some of your videos or other people that you spoke to or whatever. I don't need to be the catalyst. All I want is for people to think critically, and especially if they hear, nonsensical things being said and they are part of that group, so to speak, and they go, hang on a moment, that doesn't sound right. A bit like Abu. Somebody says something and it's, and it just triggers something for them. They start to look it up and they go, hang on a moment. And then the dominoes start to fall. All right. Yep, still on to sport here. All right, guys, unless there's anything else, Abu or answer. Otherwise, we'll let Abu do a... I've lost
the whole hadith, but
hadith of it. You'll do part of it. Go for it.
No, because we were talking about what Mecca was. One thing that I didn't bring up was the cave of Hira. But it's like there are many things, many hadiths we could bring up. I'm not going to read the whole hadith, but at least some part of it. Narrated by Aisha, the wife of the Prophet. Commencement of the divine inspiration to Allah's Messenger ﷺ was in the form of true dreams in his sleep, for he never had a dream, but it turned out to be true and clear as the bright daylight. Then he began to like seclusions, so he used to go in seclusion in the cave of Hira, where he used to worship Allah continuously for many nights before going back to his family to take a necessary provision of food for the stay. He come back to his wife Khadija again to take his provision of food likewise, till one day he received the guidance while he was in the cave of Hira. An angel came to him and asked him to read. Allah's Messenger ﷺ replied, I do not know how to read. The Prophet ﷺ added, then the angel held me forcibly and pressed me so hard that I felt distressed. Then he released me again and again, asked me to read, and I replied, I do not know how to read. Thereupon he held me again and pressed me for a second time till I felt distressed. He then released me and asked me to read, but again I replied, I do not know how to read. Thereupon blah blah. Anyway, he goes on like this. The point is, he's doing this in the cave of Hira. So, or I think it's Hira, actually. And if you want to know more about that, you can go to my channel and watch this Dan Gibson's documentary, talk about that.
I have posted it earlier, but post it again, Abu, for everybody so they can go watch it on your channel.
You just Google, was Petra the historical Mecca? Or you can type in YouTube, was Petra the historical Mecca?
Make it easy for them if you want them to watch it.
43 minutes, he talk about this cave and how it's not facing, that today's cave is not facing the Mecca, blah, blah. But anyway, that was the...
Quick question for you. Hopefully it doesn't take us on a long thing. What is he supposed to read if he hadn't actually written anything down at this stage? So what is he asked to read by this entity that he's interacting with? So when they held him tight and said read, what is he supposed to be reading?
Yeah, good question. He's just like, oh, afraid. I don't know how to read. What do you say? Read.
So was that a translation error, or what was the
I think this story was
supposed to be telling him to do?
I think this story was made up later. Like, it's the same way. Why did they move the place of Masjid al-Haram? I think they moved it because it was better to have them like in the middle of nowhere, beyond the reach of history, as Tom Holland said. And they also changed the prophet. I mean, if the prophet was a real historical figure, and if he is the author of the Quran is pretty well, like, if you don't accept that he is the prophet of God, it's pretty, everything in the Quran is drawn upon like Judeo-Christian and even pagan and Roman traditions, even like Alexander Romans and all kind of stuff. So this guy, if the historical guy that wrote the Quran, if it's one guy or more than one guy, were very learned for their times in all kinds of different scriptures. So, but they wanted him to be just this unliterate nobody in the middle of nowhere, and then he said, "I can't read." And this, they want to emphasize this point that he can't read, so that therefore it can't be from anyone but God. This revelation.
Yeah, but the thing is, why would an angel ask him to do something that the angel should know that he can't do?
Yeah, but I understand, but this is what those who first invented this hadith or this story, they wanted to emphasize that he
But
was.
then, are you saying that he could read?
No, he could not. He said, "I cannot read, so how can I read?" And then he says, like, "Read in the name of your Lord."
So what is your explanation for why the angel asked him something that the angel should know he can't do?
The explanation is that this story didn't happen in reality, but
Isn't that the fundamental part of the religion?
Well, it might also be that it happened in a sense that he went and meditated in a cave, as you can see in the documentary, but it wasn't that he was literally like visited by an angel. It just might be an hallucination, or it might not even be that. They might just have added it afterwards.
So why did you... Oh, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, so what, you know, because Muhammad didn't imply that he was dreaming or meditating and this came to him. He was pretty expressive that this really, really happened, and it kept really, really happening every day for many years.
Well, that's a long story. There is also an absence when Jibril disappears, and he's like, "Oh, is this really true?" And he's like, but that's the whole series. You don't have to go into that. But the point to this
was this actually a saying by Muhammad?
Yes, narrated by Aisha. Sahih Bukhari.
Because I heard now that somebody said, well, Muhammad never said it was Gabriel. Somebody else told Muhammad that it was Gabriel.
That's what I've heard in the past.
Yeah. Later in the Sirah, yes.
Wasn't it his wife?
He and his wife, they took him to this kind of saint.
Jew or something, wasn't it? Jew.
Yeah, well, I think it was a Christian.
Okay.
I'm not sure who, but maybe it was I don't remember if it was a Jew or a Christian. I think it was a Christian. And then like he said, "Oh, this is the angel that came down to Moses." Or something like that.
But stops, what's your explanation for the phrase read? Because what is he supposed to be reading if he's yet to receive the revelation?
Well, they're saying it's not actually read, it's recite.
But is that the correct interpretation? What is it? What is the interpretation? What is the actual, what does the word say?
Well, it can be both.
Oh, right. What did the original translations say before they?
I mean, you have to remember in those days when people were reading, they were reading loudly. It's very weird, but like even in Christian Europe, when like monks were reading, they were mumbling, and there was kind of this. For us, it's very natural to read without reading the words out loud, but this is actually a kind of late invention to read silently.
Yes, I just want to check something here. Change over time as well then. So what's meant by read is actually just talking loudly, but you're not actually physically looking at something.
No, I'm reading from a text. Khadija, his wife, and said, "Cover me." They covered, like, you have to remember, like, it's not obvious, like, for people to read without reading it out loud, to just read it in your own mind. See what I'm saying?
No, I missed you there.
Like, you take for granted that someone is reading without reading it out loud, reading it silently. But that is actually there are many sources that think that that wasn't that very common. Most of the people that read kind of read it out loud when they were reading.
Right.
The further back you go.
Good. Okay. Well, again, I think we've come to the end for this evening. Any last thoughts? Otherwise, we'll call it an evening. If not, I want to thank particularly Abu for his presentation this evening to finish off that section. Thank you, obviously, to Stops and Answer for
Thanks very
joining
much,
us.
Abu.
Thank you to all the viewers, and we will be back next Friday. I may have a guest on. I'll be chatting to him in the week now. Otherwise, if not, we'll fall back on a critique of a video. But I'll change the title closer to next Friday when I'm more certain whether the guest will come on or not. So thank you to everybody, and we will see you next Friday for sure. We may do a hangout in the middle of the week if one or two of us are available. If not, definitely next Friday. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Cheers.
Bye.